Welcome to the show, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday live show relating to first watches. It should be a lot of fun. There's so many of you already in the chat, so I want to get around to you first before addressing the theme of the show. Kevin, welcome. Martin, David, Patrick, Peter, getting all the names through. Kelso, Giza, Ben. There's so many of you. Dear Artifact, many of your names. Hi, welcome. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Just comment 1 in the chat and we can get the show rolling. It's a good way to start. Cheetown, Javier, Nick, Chris, Pilot Style. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. There's already 50 of you waiting and it's just a pleasure. I think we're going to have a good time. And for those of you who don't know, this is how the streams used to begin. You know, the regular streams. Lots of ones. That's great. You can hear me. Patrick, welcome. Justin Bailey, Truth Fears, Z, great to have you all here. The show is always used to work this way, where it would be a philosophical presentation around a certain subject. And today should be a good one. But before that, just need to say thank you all so much for contributing to last week's Wrist Shot Week. It was a blast, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I implore you to look at the video if you get a chance, because the pieces on offer were superb. And we'll run another show next week. This week is a topical discussion, and there's so many of you here again. Mark, Jenks, Hans, Eric Bell, you're all in. Welcome. If my voice is a little bit rough, if I do sound a bit rough, I've been shouting and screaming and laughing and applauding all day because I've been watching crafts and rugby, so excuse me. I'm trying to clear it with a bit of wine. But otherwise, thank you all for joining. And Matthew from New Zealand, as always, you're always here. It's great. Okay, so we're going to start the show with a live 5, and then we can get into the actual subject itself. And I will say off the bat that I have taken a break from the channel for a week. I've barely looked at any watches, so I might need a little bit of time to warm up, but it's been nice to take some time off and clear the head, get back into the scheme of things. Prepared a few videos, but that's about it. Carlos from Panama, great, welcome. Oh, so many. Wristwatch Experience, Barbecue. Thank you all for joining. Screaming at dogs, Duncan. No, I've been laughing and screaming at the rugby. Actually, the Welsh England game was a bit of a mess. Founder Times Capital, welcome. Always great having you here, sir. Hitting the wine to start the show, and starting with the live 5. This is the way for me to just warm up, get into the scheme of things. And if you are re-watching this, or if you are in the chat, you will be able to see all the pieces that are on offer. And let's just hope I get all the spelling right from left to right. I think so. Sometimes I'm a little bit lax with this. So in the chat right now, you can see all the names of the watches from left to right, and we can just run through them. Again, I have not done much watch-related stuff over the last few days, so I'm a bit rusty. So you can see that some of these watches have been spoken about already on the show as new videos, or they're watches that have been asked about. Since last week was all about wrist shots, this week is going to be focused more around watches that you would like to see, and yeah, we just go from there. There's a few subjects I'd like to talk about, specifically the Omega and the Zenith, but then it's all really up to you. Your suggestions, your ideas, as we get into the topic at hand. So let's start there. And I just want to say hi to everyone else. I see Carl is in the chat. It's great. Let's see who else. I'm just refreshing my stream so I can catch up. My laptop seems to slow down. Curtis, welcome. In a way, your GMT inspired this discussion a couple of weeks ago. I'll get into that now. And great having you here. It's so nice seeing all of you who have been a part of the show in the past or who comment regularly on videos. It's so good seeing you all here. It's from all over the world. I don't think, Carl, I barely ever see you on the show, so it's great. And Martin, it's so nice having you all here. Welcome. Orange hand. Okay, so let's get into the discussion itself. All the watches from left to right, we have a Zodiac Seawolf. Interesting piece, and it's great seeing that the brand is managing to take hold and it's developing and it's, you know, sought after for the most part because it has a superb history. And I think the development, the balance, it's a polarizing watch in a way because of the way the batons have been arranged and the hands. We just compare the Tudor next to it. We can see that this watch does look quite old school, quite dated in a way. Tim, welcome. Once again, there's so many of you. I need to say hi. Tim, Thomas Burnett, always great having you here, brother. I hope you're doing well after last week. Brian, Asal said, I hope I got your name right. There's someone from Italy here in the chat. Nico, I hope you're all well in Italy. Talk about this virus that's been going around. It's a bit nuts. Marius from Norway, Mezzanine, Mooseman, Bud Owens, welcome. Paul, if I just sat here shouting out all your names, it would probably take all day, all evening. Cheetown, thank you for the super chat, brother. Wearing your Seawolf as we speak. So it was a nice video. It was very brief and to the point. Just a general discussion around the brand and the brief history. It's a video that I put out this week. Watches and giggles, great having you here. And Justin, geez, once again, if I do shout out your names, it'll take the rest of the day. So this piece does look fairly dated in the scheme of things. Looking at just the way the dial has been arranged and the handset, it looks like something straight out of the 50s. And then jumping across to the Tudor GMT, these two pieces in part have something to do with the theme of the show. But the Tudor GMT seems to be quite the hot watch nowadays. Everyone is going after it, and this will be a part of the discussion as well. I plan on talking about supplementing when it comes to buying your first watch, and you really want to get a great watch. You have the money to get something that's fairly average in the scheme of things, not the one that you want necessarily. You supplement with a watch like a Tudor, possibly. And is it the best call? That's the debate. We'll get to that now. You should enjoy the discussion. And this one, there was a question, or there was a comment a second ago saying, this is the only watch that's really interesting them. This is a fascinating Seamaster, and I've opened up a few links to have a look at it, but it really caught my attention. I saw this random little excerpt from Omega a couple of weeks ago about this reference, and it's a platinum Seamaster that's linked to James Bond and Aston Martin. So we'll talk about that in a second, but it is a platinum Seamaster. I think the whole watch is platinum. Calls back to those yacht masters. When you look at the bezel styling, and it looks very clean. I like it a lot. It's actually one of the nicest Seamaster professionals I've seen in a long time. I kind of wish they made this watch mainstream because it's great. And then we jump across to the El Primero A3818. I think that's the reference. And this was made in partnership with Rake or Revolution Watch. I don't know, I get confused. But it's a reissue. It's a revival of this piece. And I would like to talk about this a bit more. Also open some links discussing this watch compared to the A384, which I don't believe, this watch doesn't hold a candle to the A384, in my opinion. Just talking about general wearability and what it offers compared to the more, utilitarian Panda. We'll get to that in a second. Interesting looking watch, and I'll get some nice macro shots so we can look at the dial in more detail and try and break up what's going on there. And then last but not least, the Breitling 765 AVI. Do they say AVI or do they say AVI? Don't know. Like I said in the video about this and the Longines, Breitling and these brands are really trying to pull out all the stops with their pieces with regards to recreating them well, paying close attention to the pieces. And it's pretty stunning. It's definitely a watch that looks to be one from the 50s again. And if I just pull out and we have a look at the two watches on the left and on the right, the Zodiac and the Breitling are two watches that pretty much share the same timeline in history. And I'm still getting around to writing about pilot watches. And yeah, Breitling is a dulling, Ross says. Okay, I would like to say hi to a few more of you before getting into the theme a little bit more, but I want this to be more, community engagement, because of course with Wrist Shot Week going around, it's more of a 3-hour presentation, and I realized that I didn't spend enough time focusing on the chat. Ross says he finds the Zenith too busy. I agree, and we can have a look at that in more detail. But I really like this Omega. It is so cool, and it really hasn't been spoken about just because it's rare in the scheme of things. It's very expensive, and you can only get it with an Aston Martin. Apparently, it's a piece that gets given to you. We will get to the webpage right now. Okay, and the pulsation meter on this Zenith, as Thomas says, that's something to look at. It's really nice seeing those jagged teeth. We can definitely talk about that more. Okay, so there's the live 5. That's how we generally, wake me up to get the show rolling. And what I'm wearing, as usual, as per always, my little old faithful. This week, apart from taking a break from the channel and preparing videos, I did finish a write-up on this little Smith's Everest, and I look forward to recording it and getting it prepared for, I don't know, a week's time, 2 weeks' time. I think you'll really enjoy it because I try and hit on the emotional points that this watch has managed to impact me with. I gave it a bit of a wash today, so you can still see gunk on the glass. That's my bad, but it's just a gorgeous little piece. If you want to enjoy a 1016 in a little package, this is the one. The modification I've made is put a custom end link and bracelet on, but it's just the best. It's a watch, and I've said this often about the piece. It's a watch that I wear when I don't want to think about watches, and that is something to internalize, actually. That's a part of the discussion. Above and beyond everything else, generally when you're wearing a watch, it's polarizing in one way or another. You look at it and then you might say, I'm not so much of a fan of the plot on this piece or the handset, and I want to change it, as a daily wearer. But this piece I can put on and wear all week and just not think about wearing a watch. It's basically what I've done. So yeah, great watch. When you want to wear a 1016 with the modern components that you can just bash around and use, that's the watch to get. Okay, getting onto this Seamaster. And before we get in any further, let's just say hi to a few more of you in the chat. There's new names every time. James, Williams Watches, Chili Badger, welcome. So good. And I can see you guys are chatting away. It's great. It's nice. This is what I really enjoy, is the discussion that goes on behind the scenes. That is why my daily watch is an Explorer 1, Mark P says. And in a way, this discussion is I want it to be used as a guide for those like me who are just about to get their first luxury watch. A toast, your first live stream. Welcome. Great having you here, sir or ma'am. A toast. It's a little bit of a genderless object. But the idea is, this discussion I want to be focused for maybe someone who is new to the hobby. If you scroll down slightly into the description of this video, I say, as an enthusiast, let me pull up a watch that's a bit better suited for the show, just like this, for example. So this is directed at all of you in the audience, and I'd like this to develop as the discussion continues. But I said, as an enthusiast, with the years of knowledge that you have accumulated, those of you who are fairly experienced, much more experienced than me in this game of buying watches, which watch would you choose as your first watch if you had the opportunity again? And the thought, hindsight is kind of irrelevant in the scheme of things, but the thought was to direct your ideas into the stream some way or another. That way we all get to learn. And there'd be some great suggestions on Submariners, what else? Grand Seiko Snowflake, I think I saw. So it should be great. As we go through, we can try and develop the discussion. Just tag me, as always, tag me in the chat at IDGuy. I'll be able to see it a lot easier, and we can continue the discussion that way. So first off, let's just get this out of the way. I wanted to talk about this watch last week, but since it was a show focused directly on everyone's watches, it didn't really happen. But this is a platinum released Omega Seamaster. I don't know if the entire watch is made of platinum, but I really like the combination. And I think because it's so flat when it shows itself, it doesn't shine. There's something about the way it presents itself. It's very different to your generic Seamaster. The sad thing is there aren't many pictures of it around, so you have to kind of be a little bit selective. Of course, what Omega fails to do with their case backs is, why would you mar the movement with all of this? What's the idea of having a clear case back if you're not going to show anything? I just do not understand this. Anyway, we're going to get away from that and look at the dial of the piece again. I really think this combination is something striking, and it would be nice to see a white gold Seamaster on the market. And it's that matte finish that I think works so well with the piece. And I see there's all sorts of comments about my first watch. We'll get into it now. I can't read essays, but we will get into it. And if I don't see your comment and you'd like it to be seen, please tag me in the chat, and maybe a bit later on. This will be a 2-hour plus stream, so I'm sure I'll get to your points as we go. But I really find this interesting, even though it has the rifling on the dial and has the Bond crest at the 12 o'clock position. It's that flat matte finish that I think works so well as an only watch, actually. You could probably wear this all day, every day. And because it's simple enough, it's not very polarizing, it's discreet, even though it's platinum. 4-hour stream confirmed, pilot style, as always. It's funny. Okay, so interesting watch, and I pulled up an article just to show us. This is from Fratello, talking about this. Apparently, it's a gift you get when you buy only made in 7 pieces. How is that? A special Superleggera Aston Martin DBS designed by Daniel Craig, allegedly. That probably means that he just sat behind a desk and said, yes, I like that. It's not exactly design. It's more like confirmed by Daniel Craig, the design of the car. But it's an interesting watch, and I think you don't only get the platinum version, but you also get the no time to die variant in these fancy boxes. Since there are only 7 of them in the world, it's it's not exactly something that everyone's going to get. Is that all? Wow, useful article. But yeah, it's an interesting watch. Again, if we look at it in this photo, you see what I mean about the flatness of it all, that it doesn't seem to shout, doesn't seem to stand out compared to the other pieces we normally see. Wow, that looks very small. I'm looking at the replay on my laptop. Okay, so there's the idea. Interesting watch. Like talking about it. I like the idea that it is so plain and sleek and understated, but is platinum. I really think Omega should look into white gold and play with this idea. And there's a mention about Bud saying, you agree the monotone is appealing. It looks really nice. It really doesn't jump out at you compared to the usual ceramic dial and the ceramic bezel, everything glossy and shiny and polished. Nice seeing an understated looking watch. It would probably ride under the radar compared to other pieces. And just as we're talking about this subject, let's jump onto the El Primero A3818 that everyone's been talking about. And this is the reissue. So just talking about aesthetics alone, I think the A384, that whole case design of those late 60s era pieces, really important. And just jumping over, we will get to my favorite. Many, many people love this watch. Some cannot go a stream without talking about this piece because it's just so interesting. With regards to the case design and the dial, the size overall, I think the watch measures about 38 mils, but that polar aesthetic, you know, I feel like it's almost on par with the A386, which is your standard tritone El Primero. This is the OG, you know, the original that came out that really started the trend. And with regards to wearability, daily use, you could wear this watch all the time and it would not be a polarizing watch. You can wear a Panda dial with practically anything and pull it off, okay? But when you're dealing with something with a blue dial, with a red highlight, this looks much more like a 70s piece. Let's see if I can find something. I know these are all renders, but we get a good idea. Now, the main point about this watch that I like, that I find visually engaging, is this, you know, San Francisco bridge style teeth. What would you call it? Tachymeter bezel layout. It's unique for the minute track. But the combination of the blue and the red, it just doesn't stand anywhere near. This is a vintage piece. As we know, these pieces are primarily vintage. I don't know how many models, how many references, how many variants they're bringing out of these pieces. But compared to the standard Panda, just doesn't hook me as much. You lose a lot of the detail, like when it comes to reading the dial. The subdials themselves are very reflective. You can see that they have this sheen around them. And with regards to legibility, you really want something that is easy to read on a daily basis and, you know, you can use in a flash. So in a way, it's nice to see that this watch has been brought out. It's really nice to see that Zenith is now recreating and bringing out these reissues. If I'm not wrong, these are pieces that are now not limited. They're actually coming out in bulk. So that's great. I mean, if we can all get our hands on these watches, it'll be awesome. It's just the case design styling, I think, is so interesting about it. The form of it, a square with a circle, it looks so good. So on that front, it's awesome seeing these watches brought out. How far they're going to take these references, do not know. Interesting, though. It's nice seeing a brand experimenting with their darling, you know, the one that really started the name and everything else. Okay, I'm going to get to you and address the chats now because I've seen a lot of essays. Here's another good, this is her dinky. I don't know, I think this is an original, probably, yeah. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'll just open up, let's look at the Tudor GMT again. It's always nice to have a look at this piece. And I'll catch up with some of you in the chat and we can get into the subject at hand. The chats have been going mad, and as always, I probably will never be able to catch up with you, but bear with me. But Owens, does the A384 wear larger? I love it, but 37 is a bit small for me. I would imagine, since I haven't worn the watch, I can't tell you, but I would imagine that the case size, being a square compared to a circle, might make it feel a little bit larger on the wrist. Interesting though. Dig the watch. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the chat because I just cannot catch up with everything. Interesting. Martin says, search for a loom shot of the 3818. Okay. Oh, I know. They've loomed the tachymeter, haven't they? I'm pretty sure. Let's have a look. Interesting. They have it looks like they have definitely loomed the tachymeter of the watch. Does look stunning. Let's see. Are there any better photos? I think that is the best. It's funny that people don't take more loom shots of watches. Okay, they haven't. Have they loomed it? I don't know. And it's a pulsation meter. Okay. I'm just having a look at the dial detail here. Interesting looking watch. But again, just in comparison, I didn't even address the subdials, the way the subdials have this zebra-esque patterning to it. Peculiar, a little bit more polarizing, I would say, compared to your generic Panda aesthetic. Saying that though, the Panda is a watch that is just, it's everywhere nowadays. We see the Panda style on practically every chronograph out there. So Ashley asking, what is a pulsation meter? So it's a pulsometer. I think that's how you'd explain it. So a tachymeter, you notice at the top of the bezel, tachymeter is used to determine your average mile per minute, depending on miles per hour, excuse me. So if you are traveling and you know the direct distance of a mile, you can calculate how fast your vehicle is traveling from point A to point B by starting the chronograph and stopping at a certain point to determine whether it's 500. It can either be in metric or imperial. It can be miles, kilometers, it can even be feet and meters. It's all relative to the distance you're traveling. Pulsations, on the other hand, is something that's a bit strange. See, what's interesting is it says base pulse stations and tachymeter. So anything, a pulsation meter is all about pulse, and doctors used to use it back in the day. It really is to determine the pulse of a person or a patient. And the idea is you start the chronograph and you count, depending on how the scale is arranged, you count 30 seconds or 20 seconds, and you're able to determine the pulse of the person, whether it's standard at about 75 beats per minute or well over, 200, so on and so forth. Interesting. And then you also get telemeter scales, which determines the speed of a projectile, determining the sound that you hear. And when the projectile lands, you're able to know how far it was shot from. All sorts of little bits and pieces. So, as we go, it's great. I was able to discuss all the different bezels out there. It's so superfluous when you think about it. No one really uses watches for that reason, but it's pretty entertaining regardless. It's something to add a little bit more variety to your wristwatch wearing experience. In a way, it makes it a smartwatch when you think about it. So let's have a look. I'm trying to keep up with the current chats. Curtis, when I went into the exchange in 1983, I went in with the intention of buying a Submariner or a Daytona. Walked out of the GMT Pepsi. 37 years later, no regrets. So Curtis, your discussion, your story behind that GMT, I don't have the photo at hand, but it is something really impactful, actually. For those of you who don't know, Curtis bought a reference 16750 Pepsi GMT, and he wore that same watch for 32 years straight as his only watch. And I really like that sentiment. It's actually something that I'm aspiring towards at this point in time with regards to the watch that I would like to get. But watches can be really polarizing. And let's get to the subject now of talking about buying what you really like and buying what not necessarily is what you are yearning for, but something to scratch the itch, if you know what I mean. Okay, let's have a look at what else is going on. I found the Timeless Capital says, my first watch kicked off my passion for horology, the Tag Heuer Curium. Wow. Okay, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at it. And this is generally how the shows go. You know, you give me a suggestion of a watch and we slowly but surely get into it. It's been a while since I've done this, so bear with me. Let's see if I spelt it right. Interesting piece. Tag Heuer, I mean, just Heuer in general. It's strange how the brand has gone from one place to another. This is the piece here. Let's see if I can get a closer look at it. Let's catch up with these. There's so many references in the line. Strange looking watch. And I think for him, King Flume also used one of these pieces as his first. Strange how it works, right? How we get into the hobby. In fact, the Heuer that I looked at that really got me interested in watches in more detail is the Jack Heuer edition. Let's pull that up as well, since we're talking about the piece. Let's see. It's a Heuer, Jack Heuer, and it's anniversary. I don't know the reference at all. I think it's not an Octavia. It's a Carrera. Some strange reason, I really found this piece attractive back in the day. I think this is when I was just getting into learning about the hobby and learning about the watches. I loved the idea of a red underline behind the strap itself. Love the balance on the dial. You can kind of see where I find it interesting. As a racing chronograph, it's something nice. The highlights of red. Okay, so it looks like it's a, what does it say, 80th. So it's the 80th anniversary of the company, I think. I can't remember the full extent of the story. But I find it to be quite an attractive piece. And this is what started me along the journey of looking into watches and learning about details over time. Heuer, I need to do more discussions on Heuer because their watches were serious pioneers back in the day. It's a really attractive looking watch. Carrera, Heuer, can't go wrong. The date complication, I don't know so much. I don't know if that's actually period correct, if they had a date on this piece. But yeah, we all have our attractions. That's what got us into the watches in the first place. Okay, let's carry on. 80th birthday for Jack Heuer, Bud Owen says. Okay, yeah, that's the one. And you can see the little 80 in the corner there that's highlighted. I much preferred it on the contrasting black strap. Don't know why it appealed to me so much, but we all have those moments in the past, you know. Tudor 36, Tudor equals Rolex defect, Ross says. Okay, so let's get to Omega is smart man's Rolex, Ross. Interesting, because I feel that way too. I really, really feel that way too. Okay, we are going to get into the thought process. I'm going to bring up the Tudor. I'm not bashing anyone who has a Tudor. This is just what I've been thinking about recently with regards to watches that we like, what we're interested in. Now, there's always a push. When you get into this hobby, there's a push to buy a great watch. Of course, I'm doing this. I would love to do that. I'd love to get a great watch. At this point in time, I could pick up one of these pieces, which is absurd. I can't say I've ever had enough disposable income to pick up a watch like this, or a Seamaster, or any of these models. But asking myself, do I want this watch? Does this appeal to me? And I say, no, it doesn't. And for that reason, instead of it being a watch that scratches an itch to say, hell yes, I just picked up a GMT with a great in-house made movement. It's just something that I don't enjoy wearing for a long period of time. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do. And this ties in with the subject itself. People buying their first watches on a whim because they're told that it's great and that they should have it. And again, I'm not bashing this watch. I think it's just it's a great subject in itself. As a piece to not necessarily pick apart, but as a piece to use as the scapegoat. People go out and buy their first watch. It may not necessarily be the one they want. Like, for example, they want to get a Rolex Pepsi GMT. They settle on this. They end up selling the watch for a loss one day, and it never was that thing that they really aspired to own at the end. So I'm more like someone who prefers to hold back and really wait and bide my time until I know exactly what I want to get. And tying in with Curtis's story about his Pepsi GMT that he bought and wore for 32 years straight, I really love that idea. And that's the goal for me. A watch that has great impact, that stands out from the crowd, and has a bit of a tie to my history, possibly, one way or another. And ultimately a watch that I can wear for the next 30 years that I never get rid of and I really wear the hell out of. So yeah, that's the opening statement. We're what, 29 minutes in, and we finally got into the discussion. And speaking of Tudor, you know, I do rip into it often. I think creatively they're doing some great stuff. It's nice seeing them step out of their way. There's a few new names: Nasty Vinyl, welcome, Reed, Kit Kimball. There's so many of you people here that I haven't mentioned. Welcome to the show, everyone. I do pick on Tudor from time and time again, but at the same time, they're doing some great stuff with what they offer, the value of the watches that they have. But in the back of my mind, as a first luxury watch, buying a Tudor, it's, you know, as far as you'd want to say, it still is an homage to a Rolex at the end of the day. And that to me doesn't appeal to me as much. So if I was given the opportunity of Omega, there's lots of mention about Omega. I would take an Omega any day over a Tudor, primarily because Omega is Omega, whether it's an Aquaterra, a Seamaster, you know. So just that's my little rant over, really. I think getting into the subject of choosing your first watch, and now we can start getting into the subject itself. I'm sure there are many in the chat. I mean, there's about 160 of you watching at the moment. I'm sure there's many of you who have once in a while in your life gone through the process of buying a great watch that you thought was for you. You end up selling it for a loss and you kind of regret it, possibly, maybe. It'd be nice to get your inspiration or your, what am I saying? I'm trying to read the chat while I'm ad-libbing here. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts on the subject and what you think about that idea. And really, if you had the opportunity of choosing your first watch again, in hindsight, I know it's not necessarily a great thing to talk about watches in hindsight. This is a gorgeous piece. Damn it, it's so irritating. Getting this watch shown to me so often, and I'm close to pulling the trigger. We'll talk about this watch as well, because I've got something to say about it. Thinking just about that subject itself and what you think about choosing your first watch again in hindsight, knowing what you do now about the pieces you've owned, about the things you've learned over the years, because I'm sure many of you have had many, many years in the subject, much more than me, and for those who are pretty new to the space. So I'm going to leave this gorgeous little 214270 on the screen and catch up with all of you here. Rolex screams, look at me, Ross says. It's a strange world we're in now where watches, you know, how some watches were designed to be used as utilitarian objects now have become these luxury, quote unquote, fashion items. Speaking of which, I have a Bond discussion, very simple. Is he a Rolex or an Omega wearer? In that discussion, I debate the two areas of how the two brands have changed over time, how one has picked up the mantle for the other, while the other watch is shown off in a different way. So let's see. Bud Owens, buying my first watch now, Omega, first Omega in space. Great. Let's get into these pieces as we go. And I'm going to try and take it slowly because you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised as to how much brain power it takes to think through all of this while talking ad lib. So the first Omega in space is just a stellar watch for those who, as far as chronographs go, the Speedmaster, it's been talked about to death. Maybe it's a watch that's been killed at this point because it's on everyone's wish list in the watch space. But the first Omega in space is something different. It's not your professional model. Has a few small accents like straighter lugs, doesn't have a protected crown guard system, uses these beautiful alpha hands. And compared to the professional, it's a bit more old school, a bit more archaic. It kind of lines up with the Ed White Speedmaster in many ways. It's the bargain Ed White Speedmaster at this point in time. Very good suggestion, Bud. Thank you. So what was I saying? I was talking about the Rolex Explorer, talking about watches that say, look at me. The debate that I bring up discussing this little Smith's Everest that I own, let me just pull it up again, side by side. Oh, that's cool. Check that out. So this little Smith's Everest pays homage to the 1016 Explorer. And in the video, as I'm sure you will see come, not next week, maybe the week after, in the debate, I say that I'm still very much interested in picking up a Rolex, especially this. The 214270 is a great watch. But then I think to myself, it still feels like a polarizing watch, to me at least. And that is down to not only the size. I think the size is a little bit big for me, for what I wear. I can wear a 39 and a 40 mil fine, but regardless. But the numerals on the dial, these modern numerals don't feel, to me, anywhere near as timeless as the numerals used on the Smith's piece. Now, that alone is something that divides my opinion on the subject. Then this question, then get the 11427. I feel the same way about the numerals on that watch. The numerals still feel too modern for my liking. And then it's down to the Mercedes hand. Is that something that appeals to me? And then it's down to just questioning, you know, I've got this piece. Why would I need to get the 214270 if this one ticks the box already in that scheme? So it's, you know, there's lots of internalizing. I can tell you that much. If you think it's bad just listening to me talking about it now, it gets way worse in my head when it comes to preparing videos about watches. And this is cool. I think these two watches side by side, you can see the 36 to 39 mil comparison. They look pretty well spaced on the screen at the moment. But it's an interesting discussion, and it is, of course, open to interpretation. I'm not saying this as fact, as law. It was just a bit of a, little bit of an internalization I was having thinking about this subject and just what it means. Let's get a better photo of this piece up. What it means for all of us who have possibly bought and sold a lot of watches over time. So let's have a look at what else is being suggested. Justin Bailey saying the 38 mil Seamaster for me. If we're talking about my suggested Seamaster professional, yes, in a way, I would love Omega to bring down the size of the case ever so slightly. That's not just for me, which I would probably be able to wear the watch a lot easier. It's for the greater good. I think many people would enjoy a scaled down watch because it's just insane how often we see these pieces for sale online. This watch could be a great example of a piece that people maybe aspire towards getting. Buy it as a first watch because they are insanely affordable and brilliant value for money for what you're getting. But then they end up selling it like 6 months later because they just don't wear it. They can't wear it. And the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe, is because it's polarizing. What does it have? Skeleton-styled hands, a wart as the helium release valve, and a blue dial, blue bezel. Unless you're someone who really loves blue to the heart and deep, it's a watch that divides opinion. You can't wear a blue watch every day unless it's something that really speaks to you all the time. Again, this is a real watch enthusiast question. Of course, we're thinking way too deeply about the subject, but it's an interesting debate, and I'm sure there are a lot of points that you can bring out with regards to the pieces that you've looked at over time. So it's interesting, very deep. And let me try and catch up with all of you now. I'm just rearranging this a little bit neater and see what else is going on. I can't do the Seamaster Professional. I know that it's hearsay, but I'm not a huge fan of it at all. And, you know, in that same way, Bud, it's almost like everyone dictates to you that this is a great watch. Why? and then you list. This is kind of how these watches are sold to you. It's a great watch. Why? Beautiful movement. It's a workhorse. It can be used for the rest of its life, no problem. Ceramic bezel, ceramic dial, wave dial, calls back to nostalgia. It's a 90s inspired piece. It's the James Bond watch. All of these little things are made to, you know, tug at your heartstrings. And let's pull up a black dial variant if I can find one easily enough. Let's get a high-res image somewhere. And because of that, when these watches are sold to you in that way, come on, can I get a good face? I don't know. That's good enough. You're almost forced to enjoy them in our hobby because they're seen so much, you know? But should it be a watch that appeals to you for those reasons? Or when you look at, for me at least, I find it, again, a polarizing watch because of X, Y, Z. And I'd like to pull up that little 38 mil Aquaterra. Oh, this little Zenith is great, though. It's a cute little thing. What did I say? 38 mil Aquaterra. Let's just pull up Aquaterras in general and have a look at those. Again, we're talking about sports watches. This can also be linked to dress watches and everything else. But it's a discussion worth having. And I don't know why this is coming up low res. Please don't tell me my internet signal is cutting out on me here. So another example, talking about this watch, I've always said that it's almost too symmetrical. Anyway, get to that now. I see many comments questioning things. And please, if you guys can, if you give me references for watches, like Vukasin is just mentioned, IW37709. It gets a little bit heavy, but let's pull it up before I forget. So there's going to be a lot of suggestions, I'm sure, over time. So I hope you found that at least partially engaging, the little tirade that I went on. Oh my goodness. IWC, what? IW37709. Some brands really know how to label their watches better than others. I'll say that much. That's kind of why I enjoy brands like, well, Omega is probably the worst when it comes to their reference numbers. So, okay, I'm going to leave this watch up for a second and just jump to this. I think this is quite a nice picture, just so I can address some of you guys. Robert, kept my Speedy Pro, sold my Explorer. And is that the Explorer 1 that you sold, or is it the Explorer 2? And there's been some questioning. I did a video about Basel World predictions, and I mentioned Explorer 1 a lot in the video. And for those, if someone is there and commented on the idea, why I say Explorer, I know it's called the Explorer. I call it the Explorer 1 because not everyone here is an expert on the subject. Like, everyone seems to, claim they are. For someone who's new to the hobby, they might not know that there are, in fact, 2 Explorers. That's the only reason. Anyway, so I'm going to try and address the comments that are linked to me somehow or another. First real watch was a 36 Seamaster Professional 2.5. Yeah, cool. Blue dial. Hardly ever take it off the wrist. Polished bezel, sword hands. Still love it. So does that have the blue dial? I can't remember. Let's pull that up as well. It's nice to be talking about Omega for a change. Seamaster 36, and the reference is 2253. No? Like the 2254? Yeah, okay. So we're talking about blue dials and polarizing. I mean, here's another example. Let's see if we can find a good high-res image. There we go. So this was your first watch. I don't know if it came on the professional bracelet or the Speedmaster style bracelet. But it's interesting how our tastes adapt. There was also mention about an Oyster Perpetual earlier. Sorry if I missed it. I see Clive is in the house. Welcome. Rooted Rotor. So many of your names. I'm going to try and address the comments that are linked to me, if possible, just to make things a little bit more sped up. Mr. C, here's a 007 Seamaster 36mm. Interesting, right? I still find, compared to the James Bond variant, I find this one a little less polarizing. I think it's down to the hands and the placement. It would be nice to see this watch with a matte bezel instead of a polished one, but they are cool watches. I mean, easy to wear, and the size. Talking about 36mm, it's nice to hear people coming out of the woodwork saying, yes, I proudly wear my 36mm watch. And just the reason why I made a video about that a couple of days ago, just with regards to the bracelet dimensions relative to the bezel and the dial proportions and everything, seems more integrated. Seems like there was more attention to detail, if you know what I mean. Okay, Breguet Type 20, Transatlantic, etc., etc. Let's keep this up. I really like that watch. Let's pull up the Breguet Type 20. Interesting point. Now, let's see, 3820. The Transatlantic is one of those, let's see, where's a good example? Keystone. Is that a good example to look at? Now, this watch, I think, has quite a lot of gravitas behind it. There's an interesting debate about this piece. And what I love about running a channel is that, is this a better example to look at? I just want to try and get something high res for all of you to look at while I talk over it. Scanning. I think this is that better? Joma Shop. Okay, here's an example. No, I don't like it. Sorry, everyone. It's taken me a while to get back into this space. So just give me a second. Okay, so there's been an interesting debate about this watch. And I will now drop down to the bottom of the chat because I'm going to be missing a lot of your chats. Okay, Seamaster 200, Cheetown says. That's pre-bond, right? It's an interesting piece. I'd actually like to pull it up as well. So the debate about this watch, which is interesting, is that many say this is not a Breguet because it doesn't exactly fall in line with what we expect when we think about Breguet watches. It It rides that line of being a sports watch. It keeps some of Breguet's motifs, like numeral placement, coin edging on the case, but on the whole, they find it to be more of a sports watch than a Breguet. You could say the same about the Marine, but whatever. I think this watch has quite a unique placement in the marketplace because it has that name of Breguet linked to it, but it's also a sports chronograph. Stylish, balanced. Interesting watch. I haven't thought about it too much, and I would like to do a write-up about this piece in the future because there's some things we can address with this watch in comparison to the likes of the first Omega in space, for example. Very interesting pieces. So it'll be nice to get into this a bit more. Okay, Scottish Watches. Welcome, gents. Great to have you here. Okay, I need to scroll up a little bit so I can catch up with what else is going on in the chat. Love 36. It's about the comfort factor for me. I feel the same way, Williams Watches. When it comes to wearing a watch as your first watch again, possibly, maybe, it's that idea that you have it, you can wear it, you can see it, but then when you don't want it, when you necessarily don't want to feel its weight on you, it can be out of the way. It's out of your mind, you know, out of sight, out of mind. Okay, let's see what else is going on. I just like the Nautilus. I just like the Nautilus is not a Patek, Martin says. Let's pull up a Nautilus. And again, your suggestions on the subject would be great on this subject with regards to watches that if you had the opportunity of possibly getting, in hindsight, knowing what you do now, if you could choose your first watch again, what would it be? And there seem to be lots of suggestions around Rolexes and Omegas, primarily. So the Nautilus, yeah, this watch, it's funny because as far as sports watches go, it's one that I'm quite tired of talking about. It's been just hyped to death. And the question now is whether or not its value, you know, its inherent value is going to remain because of, you know, trade and because of the little case of Corolla going around or Kung Flu, as people are talking about. Okay, let's have a look at what else is going on here. Grand Seiko as a first luxury watch. Good point. The one thing that divides everyone's opinion, and I haven't gotten to this IWC yet, we will have a look at it now. And I want to keep the Aquaterra on the screen. Let's move the first Omega in space. Again, talk about a great first watch. It's something unique. It actually, compared to the Speedmaster Professional, it stands out much better than the Speedmaster Professional in many ways. I love the motifs, the fact that it was still in its beta testing days, you know. So for that reason, as a first watch goes, it has, yes, you're getting a Speedmaster, but it has that X factor of being something quite unique, you know, marginally unique. Okay, so the suggestion was Grand Seiko. And the one thing that just divides opinion with all of these watches is the name on the dial, of course. The name Seiko on the dial has been assigned to affordability. And I think that's what really detracts from it the most, which is sad in a way, because as we know, the watches are great value. They are very much in a different segment to regular Seiko watches. Let's get the snowflake up. Let's find something that's a bit more high res if we can. Let's see. Again, everyone, forgive me that I'm a bit slow. I'm still getting into the show ever so slightly. I love this cream dial. So the name just the name Grand Seiko, as it is by itself, is what seems to divide a lot of people's opinions. And it is a market for a certain individual. I almost consider the watches and their movements hybrids at this point. It's like a hybrid car, you know, with regards to the spring drive. Next to Swiss-made, just standard automatic movements, or German watches. So let's see. Vislan says, Grand Seiko may not be the best first watch, but for people already tired about Swiss watches, I believe. I think you got cut off there. But yeah, it is a watch that appeals to a very specific person, and I think that's the issue. The thing is, when you look at a brand, it seems almost like they're detractors, depending on the watch you're looking at. So what can we say about Rolex? Yes, they're great. Talking about value for money, I think they are pretty heavily priced for what they offer. Like this watch, for example, I mean, it's just a time-only reference with no external function. Yes, it's a good thing, but for the price it's being offered at, it's pretty ludicrous. And then there's the stigma behind the name, that it is, you know, for some people, it's quite a pretentious watch to be shown wearing. When you say you're wearing a Rolex, yes, it's got a nice clout factor. Yes, it's something you can aspire towards owning. But at the same time, it could rub people the wrong way. For a brand like Omega, yes, they make some great stuff. Their movements are superb. But then they also have these polarizing pieces that people don't really know how to categorize. Where I see the Explorer as something really focused on the sport, I look at the Aquaterra and it seems like it takes both elements and tries to combine it together in a way. With a dial that is so symmetrical, it's difficult to read because you kind of get lost in some of the details. Lots of emphasis on polish and all these little bits and pieces. And then we look at a brand like Tudor, which we had on the screen a second ago. There was a mention in the chat about poor man's Rolex. So, you know, it's all stigma, I think, also detracts people from certain pieces. Grand Seiko, name on the dial is one point. Spring drive is another point. But for those who know, and the Japanese made, I think it's also something that doesn't appeal to many. You know, a Swiss watch has always been this pioneer that everyone has aspired to own. And now all of a sudden going to a Japanese piece, quite ironic actually, because if we know the history, and I still haven't spoken about the IWC. Does that tell you that it's a watch that doesn't appeal to me? Don't know. Okay. So I was saying, the irony is that English and French watchmaking really put the whole idea of watchmaking on the map. They outsourced watchmaking to the Swiss. The Swiss decided they could do a better job, so they started making their watches, putting English and French watchmaking out of business. And now the Japanese seem to be doing the same thing for the Swiss industry in a way. Not necessarily as heavily, but you get the idea. Japanese are now saying, hey, we can do something just as well, and they're trying their best. So, Sam, great. At last, no coronavirus. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many views you can get talking about coronavirus in the watch game. It's funny. But again, I've spoken about Baselworld at length just to get attention to my renderings. Blue Shirt, welcome to the show. Great having you here, sir. Forben, okay. Real men get others to tell them time. Yeah, true. Very true. So, okay, let's see what else is going on. Of course, I'm missing all of you, as per always. So if you can just repeat your question and tag me in the chat, it'll be much easier for me to catch on and see what you've said. Tim from Germany, welcome. So this IWC and the reference, it's a mark. I can never understand the mark references on this, but it's a reference IW37770984-. It's a watch that's popular. It is a watch that seems to have quite a draw for many. And it's that idea. What I do like is that they've taken the Flieger aesthetic and have been able to blend that chronograph function into it. It looks like an instrument that could be used. It looks fairly modern in the way that it presents itself. With the date complication, you know, difficult. The one that I really like and the watch that I've always spoken about in the IWC space, the Spitfire is quite a nice watch. Let's pull that up for a second. Ridiculously priced for what you're getting, as most of us probably know. I like the idea that it takes, well, that's a gorgeous photo. It looks like a rendering, I don't even know. What I like is that it takes inspiration from Fliegers, from field watches, puts it together in a relatively small package. It was mentioned about Tudor a second ago, was it? Tudor, no, there was mention about 38mm field watches that I just saw as the chat disappeared. And there's something about a field watch that makes for a great first watch to be used. But again, for what this watch is going for, the price, the fact that you don't even get a bracelet, the problem. The one IWC that I've really liked for a long time, and if Ron the Shrink is in the chat, he picked up one of these. And this, I think this is the John Mayer watch. This is what's been touted as the John Mayer IWC. This, to me, is just terrific in the Flieger scheme. And now that I've said that, I've probably pushed like 15 of you to look at it. It's the reference 5002. What they did so well here was take that Flieger aesthetic, really keep it there, keep it present, bring it down ever so slightly so that it is now a great daily wearer for people who have, you know, fairly larger than average wrists, I would say. It's still pretty big. But for those who have 7 inches and above when it comes to wrist size, I think it's just terrific. You have a huge day power reserve, a 7-day power reserve, date complication in the center, the offsetting of the power reserve and the balance between that and all the numerals on the dial, big crown, keeps all of those Flieger aesthetics together, but still manages to look modern and usable, wearable. IWC and the Flieger, hand in hand. I think it's important to say that. And interesting watch. So for me, if I was going IWC as a first watch, this would really hit the mark, because it captures all of those elements while still being something really usable and wearable on a daily basis. Founder Times Capital says, you reviewed the Seiko field watch yet? I haven't, Founder. I actually got in contact with them and never got a reply afterwards. We had a back and forth once or twice, and then the emails went cold. I should follow up, but as it is, I'm backed up with subjects and topics and write-ups, but I hope to get into separate reviews from time and time in the future. Talking about just the idea with bracelets, IWC have made some amazing bracelets with their watches. In fact, there was a 36mm piece that I saw the other day. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Wow, that was easy. And I think there's something about this watch that appeals to me. The reference, for your information, you can write this down, is IW324002. It's a 36mm. Keeps that field watch aesthetic. Excuse the Watches of Mayfair serial all over it. But the bracelet that they have on this watch, isn't that stellar? This feels like a German-inspired Flieger/field watch that could be worn every day. Is simple, understated. 36mm, yes, might be a bit too small for those. It looks like the bracelet doesn't taper, so it could be 20mm all the way around. Really, really interesting. And just getting back into that Spitfire story, this is a watch that probably goes for half the price of a Spitfire. Great value for money for what you're getting. I don't know if it has an ETA. Probably does. This was probably before their in-house movements that they brought back. Anyway, great looking watch, and it's quite a nice piece to assign to the segment of a first watch. What do you really want to get? And let's see if I can catch up with some of you. There's so many. It's great that you guys are chatting amongst yourselves, so it gives me some time. Let's see. Torben saying, first watch, the new two-tone Sea Dweller, True Diver. I bought the Rolex Explorer 2, 216570. Don't regret it. The luxury Sea Dweller will complement my Explorer 2. Okay, let's pull that up. So you've had a look at the Explorer 1, or the Explorer for the pedantic members of the community. And the two-tone Sea Dweller, I can go on a bit of a tirade on this watch. I do not understand why they did this with this watch. I think in part this is a good photo from Time and Tide. Hope it loads. Let's see. There we go. I find it so peculiar that they assigned two-tone to this watch, because to me, and I think to most of us in the community, the Sea Dweller is a watch that is that epitome diver from the family. It's that great meld of heavy duty, but also dress and sports elegance. And making it two-tone kind of negates that ruggedness factor that you want from the watch. For me, in this configuration, the two-tone, I would say the root beer is one that really appeals to me. In fact, I'm actually going to pull it up because it's a watch that I've been considering as well. Let's say Rolex CHNR. That's the name, I think. This is Rolex Forums. Oh, this is cool. This piece to me really screams. I mean, hell, if I was in the market for a Rolex at this price right now, I would jump on this. Don't know why. Don't even know if I would wear it. I find the super case wears a bit large for me, personally. I think the slimmer cases are more appealing, a little bit more understated for what they are. But the combination of colors, the rose gold and everything, not saying that the Sea Dweller, it's a terrific watch. I mean, what are we saying? But the two-tone aesthetic, I really just don't get in the space. I mean, you have two-tone two-tone Submariners. They've practically put everything in two-tone at this point in time. I would not be surprised if the Explorer goes two-tone all of a sudden, you know, the way it's going. But, you know, also the size, 43 mils. Does that appeal to everyone? I don't know. Polarizing. It's difficult. This is a very difficult debate, and it is all opinionated, you know. Dear Artifact, talking about design. I don't even think I've said hi, Dear Artifact. Welcome. Follow him on Instagram. If you do have Instagram, get on it and follow Dear Artifact. His photos are superb. The simpler the design for a first watch, the better, in my opinion. You're still learning what you like, so you don't want to go too design or complication heavy. That IWC would be great. Very good point. And Tim's saying Pelagos. Let's pull up the Pelagos. Hell, that is actually a great watch to address, because compared to the likes of a GMT, Pepsi, I think the Pelagos has its own footing in this category. And again, people will say, yes, it's just a Rolex clone in a way, but I don't think so. I think this is a time, one of the only times, that Tudor has really gone out of their way to bring something unique in the family of their own. Snowflake hands, a beautiful recessed dial, beautiful snowflake dial. And there's a mention about the Planet Ocean. Good point. There's some great watches. I don't even think I've addressed the 5711. It's cool. Over the last year of talking about it, I don't think it's a watch that really gets doesn't get me excited to talk about much, because I think it's just been overdone. It's interesting how we get to a point where it's just like, yeah, yawn, let's move on to the next thing. Some watches manage to stay, you know? Okay, so let's see what else is going on, and we'll get to, there was a mention about rose gold. And so the simpler the design, it's a great point from Dear Artifact. He always manages to contribute great mentions of things. So talking about the CHNR, I just love the color combination. I've said it enough on these shows before. The brown, the black, rose gold, it works so well in combination with various skin colors, skin tones, whether it's white skin, black skin, dark skin, whatever. The use of this compared to yellow gold, I think, is just exponential, because you can wear this every day. You have that subtle elegance of rose gold and a finish. At the same time, it's just a great utilitarian instrument. Interesting. Of all the Rolex watches on sale at the moment, you know, if I had the money, I think I would pick this over an Explorer 214270 at this point in time, personally. Now, getting back to Pelagos, like I said, I think it's a watch that manages to stand on its own 2 feet. Think of the innovation behind the bracelets and the clasp and everything they've done there. Don't know so much about the blue dial. That's polarizing again. The left-hand drive, I don't know who this watch was designed for in the first place. That's actually a good point. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this in a second. Let me just catch up with you as I pull this on the screen. Okay. Let's see. Seamaster 300 coaxial. Yes, Tim, that's superb. Jacob & Co., Mr. C, as a first watch, absolutely. Jean Identity, great having you here, sir. Another name. Get on Instagram and follow the Jean Identity. Your collection is just unbelievable. Tool Watch Legacy, let's evolve, John said. And you're the kind of person who would, I mean, you hit that point really well, because the watches you have everything ranging from the tool watches to the more elegant dress pieces. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Pelagos a little bit more. I'd like to ask this question to the audience about the idea of a left-hand drive. Who was this actually marketed towards? Is this marketed towards those who wear watches on their left wrists? Because I really don't know. I can imagine it probably was for people who don't want the crown digging into them. It's definitely not designed for someone who wears it on their right wrist, because we get along just fine with watches and crowns being away from us. I don't know. I don't understand the thinking behind it. But again, I'll say that it's a watch that manages to stand on its own feet. And for that reason, talking about the GMT in comparison to this, I think this one has greater clout in the Tudor space. In fact, if it was me going for a Tudor right now, I would probably edge towards this watch, just because it resembles the brand and its creativity a little bit more than the standard pieces they offer. Okay. Black Bay 58 from Raymond. That's cool. It's another great watch. I think what the 58 has over most is size. And I think it's amazing that people seem to be gravitating towards this watch a lot. I mean, here it is compared to the first ETA variant. I would imagine this is 41, and this is, what, 39? I don't know the size proportions. I miss seeing the rose on the watch, though. It would be nice to see the Tudor rose. The smiley self-winding, I think, is something tied to Tudor. There was mention about that in the chat, that they should get away from it with the Pelagos. But I think self-winding, that smile, is something really tied to the name, which I think is quite unique and cool. Okay. So let's see what else is going on here. There's so many, as always, there's suggestions. If you can tag me in the chat, I'll be able to get to them easier. Let's see. How about a minty 2-line 14060 Submariner? Okay, let's have a look at that as well. And while we do that, so the Aquaterra is a cool watch, I think. It's unique in its space with regards to value and everything else. I find it a bit too simple for everyday wear and for, you know, again, this is an enthusiast talking about the subject. Okay, so let's pull up what was the suggestion again? 14060. So 2-line, I think there we go as an example. So, you know, in a way, this is something else I've been debating, talking about getting my first watch. It's such an obvious choice going towards a no-date sub. You mean, well, just the Submariner. Again, I say no date because someone might not know the fact. But I find it so generic at this point in time. Maybe it's because I've just seen so many of them and I've been around them. If it was me going for a watch like this, I would probably go towards a 5-digit Sea Dweller instead. Just because of the size is slightly different. It's a little bit more beefy and rugged. As I mentioned, slightly agree with Clyde. I'd like to see what he mentioned there, but I probably missed it because there's just so much going on. Saw the new Bond Seamaster 300. Great looking watch in the metal, even with the NATO. Jean, so you're talking about the James Bond No Time to Die variant. Let's have a look at that quickly, since we're on the subject of Seamaster. No Time to Die 300 Seamaster. Oh, geez. Pity the film has been delayed. Seems like this virus really has gotten people a bit miffed. But in all seriousness, we should take it seriously. It is just a flu. It is a virus that will probably affect a very small population of people severely, but it is something you should take seriously. So I've mentioned, we can talk about this watch in a second. For the price they're charging, Nick Folks just wrote an article about this, and I'm looking forward to reading it. But I think they overplayed the patina a bit too much with this reference on the dial and the bezel and everything else. It's a little bit too excessive. What I think is important is that it doesn't say James Bond everywhere, you know, so you could get away with wearing it without a problem. Great suggestion, though. And Tippy, welcome. I see that you're late. You just said, yeah, welcome. So what do you think about buying as a first really expensive watch, something out of a TV show? For me, Walter White wore a Tag Heuer Monaco caliber 12. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Martin. That's a good point. I think in a way, the watches we see in films do push us in a certain direction. I've always been someone who's liked the watches of James Bond, for example. And I know it's cliche and generic, but James Bond definitely was a huge influencer for me with watches back in the day. Okay. Black Bay 58. Just scrolling down and catching up with all of you before we get faux patina is faux, Reed says. Yeah, I agree. I like the Spectre Bond version much better, but and I do too. Actually, I do feel this to me. What did I say? I said I made a video about this. Sometimes you get a bit Spectre. Let's just compare these two pieces. I think it's important to see just where they sit in comparison to each other. Okay. The joke is I made a video about this like a week ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. And I'm thinking that you've all seen it, but I haven't published it yet, you know? So I'm just getting my thoughts back together. What I think they've done is overplay the patina too much. What I find interesting is that it's a watch that calls back to the original partnership. Since it's Bond 25, it's like the 25th year of partnership between Omega and James Bond. It's nice. I like the idea that it calls back to the Brosnan family of watches, you know? But then they, again, overplayed the patina a bit too heavily on the watch. I would have loved just seeing a blue dial, you know? They could have just kept it simple. They could have just left it like the original blue dial variant with the standard bracelet. But the Spectre variant, on the other hand, this to me, I think, is quite an interesting watch in the line because it plays on vintage motifs in many ways. It calls back to those vintage Seamasters, but cases it in a modern looking watch. And then they tie in the dress element with a NATO. Great use of sword hands. Why not use sword hands, Hans? Sorry, I didn't catch that. So I really like that idea of them ideas of sandwich dials and making it look relatively modern, but not overdoing it. This could still be worn every day as a great piece, even though it is a James Bond watch. But I think they played this a lot better. And it feels like there was a bit more inspiration behind this. This watch to me seems a bit of a quickie, They just said, hey, we've got a new Seamaster. Let's just throw some patina on it. Everyone loves patina on their pieces. Let's put a mesh bracelet on it because some have mentioned that Seamaster meshes and Omega meshes are great. It'll call back to vintage pieces at the same time. It's quite a logical step in many ways. You could kind of see this being discussed in a board meeting. Funny. Okay. It looks like a Pelagos left-hand drive, American Jedi. Talking about this piece, yeah, I agree. It does, you're right. At least the watch and the Spectre ones are subtle about the Bond part. And don't say 007 on the second-hand balance. Yeah, exactly. Like the Aquaterras. Many Aquaterras had all sorts of things like crests and all sorts of just ridiculous motifs on the dials. It's just not necessary, It's nice seeing that these watches, they're starting to wake up to the idea that people don't want to see James Bond every time they look at their watch. They want it to be something great to wear, but also just usable on a daily basis without that callback all the time. Great point, M-Technic. IDGuy, it's ridiculous, coronavirus. However, 1983 Rolex Submariner, the year I joined the military, it's very serious. I need to buy one. Any for sale? That's a question out from Mark. 1983 Submariner. I think you mentioned in my Instagram post, it was a 16800? Is that the reference? 16800? That's pretty funny. Opinion on the Seamaster 300 Master Coaxial, Tim K. For what you're paying for. And in a way, I say this this is the model, right? This is the Seamaster 300. This is the Bond variant. I think the Bond variant did it quite well. I love the lollipop hand and everything. When we're talking about value for money, I think that's important for someone who is going after a first watch. You want something that has a bit of an X factor. I truly believe this watch has a great X factor in the line of Seamasters and everything else. You look at the movement quality and the fact that Omega won't stiff you when it comes to surfacing and everything else. The build quality. For what you're getting, I think these watches are great. And the coaxial movement, I mean, we could go on for ages talking about its properties, the meta certification. They really go above and beyond with their pieces. And yeah, we're just rolling. Cheetown, discussing watches while fitting a gigantic pizza into my fridge. It's great, Cheetown. It's nice to multitask. SMP with Fotina to me is like a 90s Porsche with rust on the fenders. The 90s Porsches had the poached egg headlights, right? That car to me is just a sin. For me, a Porsche with, or Porsche, however you want to say it, with those squashed looking headlights, oh, I just feel a bit icky inside when I see it. Anyway, getting along. And again, Porsches for me have to be air cooled. D196, Sam. I don't know if there's that a watch reference. Okay, Planet Ocean. Okay, I've got it pulled up. Thank you. Let me just catch up with everyone else here. I know someone that has a 16800 reference. Mark, get in touch with Founder Timeless Capital. And Tetley, welcome to the show. The Spectre Omega is aging very, very well. Good point. Very good point, John. So that's the question then. Something that you want to be relative. Great line. That kind of bridges a gap in this discussion. You want a watch to wear for the next 30 years, say, okay? You need it to be something that lasts the test of time. You know, as a watch that you can look at now and 10 years from now and say, hell, it's terrific. This watch looks like something that'll last the test of time. I think it looks stunning. This watch, I don't think has the same amount of pull. And in that way, I feel like this piece was more planned. This piece was more schemed and, a bit dare I say, designed around the idea of being something long-lasting. This watch, on the other hand, looks like something slapped together, which is quite sad because it really, it's a great watch, terrific movement and everything else, but a little bit too much thought, or a little too little thought possibly, went into that compared to a watch like this. A very interesting point, Jean Identity. Thank you for bringing it up. It is a terrific looking watch. I think we should jump on this before it really gets out of hand, you know? Okay, so multi pork pie. Thank you. Talking about the Planet Ocean. And I pulled up the 39. Is this the 600? I think it is. The 39.5 mil Planet Ocean. I'd actually like to internalize and think a little bit more about this watch before really giving a clear opinion on the piece. But let me just get into the chat and catch up with all of you here. Ideal first watch, 39 mil Explorer. Ooh, Christopher Day, thank you so much. I'll address your super chat now in a second. Jeepers, I've missed a lot of your chats. See what happens when I go on tirades talking. Oyster Perpetual 39, Jeff says, Jeff White. That is a watch that I think does have quite a factor. Let's actually pull that up as well. Since we have been talking about the 39 mil Explorer, I think these pieces do have something about them. And the white dial for me is something quite charismatic, characteristic. Is that a good picture to use? I don't know. I find this really calls back to those original Oysters worn in the 20s and the 30s. Anyway, get back to that now. The Planet Ocean as a watch, it's like Rolex's Sea Dweller. It is the real rugged watch. And I think in a way, this is what kind of miffs me about the new Seamaster Professional. And while I do that, I need to catch up with everyone in the chat. Geez, Omega 369 so far on the dial. Do I like them? Yes, Forbin, I really do. I really do. That in a way is why I'm so pulled to Omega as a family. And Angie's saying the 2234. What reference is that? I cannot remember. Is that the 36 mil? Any thoughts on the new Seiko releases? Thomas says. Okay, let's pull those up as well. See, I'm juggling all sorts of suggestions and questions. Okay, Christopher Day, thank you so much for the super chat. And you said, great show and interesting topic as always. If I had to do it all again, first watch, I would go Hamilton, Khaki, Pioneer, Pilot, Mechanical. I've got to pull that up as well. So from Forbin saying, do the 369s appeal to me? They really do. That and a reason is why I like Omega and the way they do their dials. Okay, so what was the suggestion earlier? I missed it. I'm juggling way too many subjects. Okay, let's get back on topic. Sorry if I missed your question. I'm trying to balance everything here. What really miffs me about the Seamaster Professional as a watch is I feel like it's encroaching on Planet Ocean lines, Planet Ocean territory. The Seamaster Professional, to me, as a watch, is a piece that can double up for being something formal and sports and does all of those things. That's how, I mean, think about, that's how they marketed it back in the day. When we're talking about the Brosnan era, Seamasters, he wore them in all the films with suits and it looked great. It was very utilitarian. It was a great gadget. I think you'll enjoy the video about Bond. I talk about it for like a good 10 minutes, running through just how it played such an important role in the films and how it really got itself on the marketplace because of it. So I feel like these new Seamasters, in a way, are encroaching on the style of the Planet Ocean, which was always a piece that was built to be rugged, 600 meters, something to throw in the water and to use and to bash around. These are insane value for money, actually. You can get them for like, what, $2.5 grand, and this thing would last you the rest of your life. Something about the 39.5 mil that I find really interesting. The size, the wearing potential. It looks like it wears a lot bigger, which is great, actually. You could use this thing, smash it around and just enjoy it as a more rugged watch that you would take. If you were a spelunker, for example, or someone who really did rough sports, active things, this is great. Where I think the Seamaster 300 is a watch that is more catered to both ends of the spectrum. I hope you get what I mean here. Okay, I think it's a bit too top heavy, Tim says, and that's a good point. It is a watch that's that's something that detracts my appeal, is I don't find it very nice seeing a 15 mil or 13, or it's the coaxial movement they use in these. And I don't know why they've made it so thick. I guess it's in part due to its 600 meter water resistance and everything else. But it's just a great value for money watch. I love the articulating end link. They're doing some really good stuff. They're the charismatic, the case styling that they use calls back to, and this is a good point, it calls back to the original Seamaster divers issued to the military. What was the reference? I'll probably never be able to recall the reference, but you know what I mean. The MOD, Ministry of Defense Seamasters. Let's get a better picture. What am I doing? Get some high res up in here. Let's see. It's very difficult to grab images at a glance. Okay, going to catch up with all of you again. There's talks about Omega, about Rolex again. Too thick, as AAAAA says. Okay. And Ross, thank you. Thank you so much, Ross. So DB, I found your channel because a Tudor that doesn't pretend to be anything else, North Flag. And the North Flag, again, is another one of those watches. Great point. The North Flag is another watch that seems to disregard what Tudor is doing, copying the GMTs and the Submariners. It goes its own way. Another watch that I really like is the Black Bay P0, the Black Bay? I don't know. The P01, that strange, bizarre military watch. Let's pull it up. It's such a peculiar piece, but I'm actually going to do a video discussing whether or not this watch has become popular again over time. After a year, it's only been out for about a year. It divided opinion greatly at first because this is a better picture. As we know, when this watch was released, everyone was thinking it was going to be the next Tudor Submariner, and they kind of gave us the finger and brought out this prototype. And there's been complaints about it, and it doesn't wear that well. And this watch looks terrific on a bracelet, by the way. Highly recommend you look it up on Google or whatever else. And next to the original, I mean, some people say this watch should have stayed a prototype, but it's another piece that I find is quite adventurous, you know? Let's see, the 2254 from Hans. Okay, let's pull that up as well. And geez, I'm running out of space here. This is great. So I dig the Spectre. The Spectre 300 is really cool. 2254. Now this watch really does something unique. Talking about X factors, this is great. This lines up with choosing first watches again. And while we're there, let me just scroll down slowly. Let's see if I can catch up with all of you here. Again, if you tag me, I will be able to see the comment easier, but it's difficult as it is. So let's see. Cheetan say that the Seamaster Professional to me was a nice balance between Aquaterra and Planet Ocean. Very well said. And I think that's how they tried to market themselves in that space. First luxury watch was a Rolex 126234, black dial 36, fluted bezel. Really interesting. My 30th, nearly a year ago from Maz. That's really interesting. And I would like to, I've been working on a write-up on the Datejust. Haven't gotten around to finishing it yet, but, you know, Tim talking about the Heuer Octavia. so many suggestions. And Clive saying you need to keep this going for another hour and 40 minutes. What is that? I probably will. At this point. 12:30, which is what? A good hour and a few from now. Heuer Octavia, I will have a pull up just now, Tim. Seamaster screams 90. So we're talking about this piece. I think it's something interesting. Okay, so we spoke about the first Omega in space a second ago and how it manages to stand out next to the Speedmaster Professional. Let me just clear my throat and get some wine. This piece to me does the same thing next to the Bond Seamaster Professional. I really, really like the callback that this piece has to those vintage pieces that were supplied to the military back in the day. Here's a great example of the two. So there's your modern ceramic next to, just try and get a close shot if possible. There's your modern ceramic next to your vintage piece. And this watch to me seems a lot less polarizing than this. I don't know why there's such a great emphasis. Hey, there's my, if you want to see a video discussing the history of these pieces, highly recommend you check it out. Check it out. Put it on a NATO strap. That was a great little render. So highly recommend you have a look at the video I made about it. It's one of my favorites, actually. Interesting watch. And they also come out in 36 mils. So I think with regards to standing out and being an outlier in this family, it's a hidden gem. Like the Speedmaster Mark II, there are many, many pieces out there. Okay, let's see what else is going on. Freddie Turner. First proper watch was a mid-sized, basic Reverso, no regrets. Very good point. And that is a watch that you could wear for the rest of your life, no problem. And we can pull up a Reverso as well. It's talked about often enough. Let's see. There's one Reverso that I really like. Let's see if I can get it for you all. It's got a black dial and it's almost got Breguet numerals to it. And I can't for the life of me remember the name. Oh, there it is. So, no, that's close. Not really. I think that'll have to do. I'm just browsing the screen on the side. When we talk about Reversos, the typical watch you gravitate towards is just the classic with nothing on it. But there's something about the use of these numerals on the dial I don't know so much about the complication, but I just love the idea of a sword hand setup. Let's see if I can find something. Will I be able to find it? Again, I'm running on airtime here, so I don't want to get in the way of the time running out. Here we go. Oh, come on. Look at that. What's the reference, just for your interest? 18 karat gold, manual wind. Ugh. Magic mouse is not helping me here. This, to me, if I was going out for a JLC Reverso right now, that's for me. I think that is a gem. Okay, I'm going to catch up with all of you. Sin 158 would be my first watch I pay on my own. Can you check it out? Tippy, I will. Can you remind me in a second as I get through this? What's more addictive, watches or pizza? G-Town. The thing is with pizza, the heavy amount of carbohydrate you consume, generally, by the end, you feel like you've done something bad and you feel like full and lethargic and bloated. Whereas with watches, you can talk about watches for hours and not feel that way. So in a sense, I think watches much more addictive thing, especially when we get into talking about the blend of just where they sit and how they work with us and what appeals. There was a mention about the side. Does the Seamaster Professional fit a 17 centimeter wrist? If we're talking about the modern one, Tim, I would say I have about a 17.5-inch wrist, or centimeters. I think I have about an 18 centimeter. I think it would, but the problem is it's down to you whether it doesn't feel oversized. Samuel saying this was my first. I don't think this JLC was your first. Okay. I'm just going to scroll down and catch up with you because I've missed so much. Why does Zen have bad build quality? Also, ridiculous service fees for $500. Many have concerns. Interesting point, Ali. I'm not someone who knows much about the watches, so I can't really comment very well. I haven't had hands-on time with them. I haven't studied them enough, and they do use ETA movements, if I'm not wrong. We will address that just now. We need to look at Zen. Need a 24-hour marathon stream for charity. I was actually thinking of doing something for the Australian fires at one stage, but Q-Town forgot I'm keto. Yeah, I don't touch this. I don't touch carb for the most part. And no, I do treat myself. As far as carbs go, I'll hit croissants and that here and there. Okay, Sin 158. There's lots of suggestions. Okay, let's see what else is going on here. JLC Deep Sea Chrono. Okay, so we're just getting into the subject of this piece suddenly. Talking about reversos, and this will tie in again to your first watch. I think it's important to look at watches a little bit more critically with the pieces that you'd like to get. And there's always talk about let's get a Reverso as a great watch. Whether dress watches appeal to you or not, that's up to debate. But for me, if I was going out for a Reverso, I wouldn't just get the generic. I would save. This is 18 karat gold. I would save and really scrimp the money together to grab one of these. But for me, I just find it so much more visually appealing with the Breguet numerals, sword hands, simple but elegant, unique. So that's something that I look for in this sense. That's something that I hope to instill with some of you with regards to what we do here. Anyway, the new Alpinist. Bruce Williams did a short video from Caleb. Okay, let's have a look at the Alpinist. I think Seiko has kind of shot themselves in the foot with the Alpinist because the new watches are so stupidly priced compared to how they used. I mean, they've virtually double the price at this point in time, right? I did a video on the Alpinist, Caleb. If you have a look on my channel, I do a brief history of the Alpinist from when it was introduced in 1961 and how it has developed over time. For me, the standard Alpinist with the green dial and the gold doesn't really speak to me much design-wise. This piece feels a lot more like an Explorer, a watch to be taken out into the field and used hard. And I love the dial and the layout. Still keeps some of those classic motifs with the cathedral hands and all of that. But the fact that it now falls under the Prospex line, it's going to turn off a lot of people, which is sad because this watch is really a fan favorite. I hate it when companies think that just because something's popular, they can milk the system and really try and bank on the idea that people will buy it because it's popular. It's irritating. Okay, catching up with all of you here. In something. I like the Reverso, the 2733. Okay, we'll get to that now. Again, if I can't keep up, bear with me. It's me against like 50 of you in the comments. So the new one has no compass bezel and is apparently 38 mils. Well, as far as I know, this is the new Alpinist with a compass bezel. Interesting. No, I don't know about is this the new piece? I don't know. Me and Seiko's, I'm not the person to ask at all. There's some channels that really specialize in discussing Seiko pieces. So it's a brand of watch that I really don't talk about often enough. But I'd like to get into it. There's some great pieces. Cheetan's saying that they have problems with their reliability. Interesting. Okay, so Tippy asking about the Zin 158. So Zin is, I mean, again, I'll emphasize, I don't know much about these pieces in general. Oh, okay, reissue. This isn't the Revolution partnership, is it? No, it's not. Interesting watch. Thank you for the suggestion, Tippy. I love their design aesthetic. It's very much their own. German, clean, simple, legible, easy to read and to use. The problem is, I think these movements are largely ETA based. And it rubs people the wrong way that they're spending that amount of money on a watch that I might be wrong. Again, you can correct me in the comments, but that's how it goes. From Illinois, Michael, welcome. It's a pleasure having you here, sir. Okay. And Jerry, I'm doing fine. I try my best. It's been a while since we've done one of these philosophical talks, and I think I want to get back on track now because we've been bouncing around on pieces. It's a little bit of a different thinking process going through these watches over time. So, OP39. This watch I really like. The white dial for me is something special. As a one watch, as an only watch, this is a great. Actually, I'll say that here now. As a first watch, one that you can really buy and keep and wear as a Rolex. If this is your one Rolex, this does it. I really think it captures the essence of what Oyster Perpetuals were like, 70 years ago. I think that's the important thing. Nothing superfluous, nothing that really takes your attention away. That the standard batons, the standard hands, the Rolex crown, it's what you expect to see. Does it have an X factor then? No, it doesn't really. And I think that might be a problem. But for someone who wants to get into Rolex and get a really great one as a one and done Rolex, and then you go out and buy, I could be someone who goes and buys an Omega. I'm very much interested in an Omega as a first watch. As far as Rolexes go, this would be a great piece to pick up to tie in with an Omega. Anyway, could you get an OP at an AD without waiting? Oh, you're talking about me in particular, Tim? I think they're still available, but it seems like the problem is with a channel like mine and all the others talking about these watches nonstop, you create demand, whether you like to or not. It's a big problem. I'm sure there can be someone answer Tim's question about if it's possible to get these Oyster Perpetuals at the moment. I don't know if they're available at authorized dealers. So Michael's saying you like the Omega on the thumbnail. If you go to the beginning of the stream again, I speak about it in more detail. It's a Platinum Seamaster Professional. It's a watch that I wanted to talk about a few weeks ago, and it's great that it was able to come up and we're able to talk about it. So yeah, for me, I think this is a watch that really does sing. And there's a question there. JLC Polaris from Tim. Great. That's a great suggestion. Let's get that up. JLC Polaris is a watch that seems to be getting a lot of attention as well. And let me try and emphasize this point. Blue dial's great. It's crazy. Honestly, I don't feel like I have much influence in the watch space. I really don't. I've never been someone, I try and be someone who's very on the fence, and I like to be real with all of you guys, always. I don't think of myself as someone really influential on this platform. I do this because I love it. I do it because I love presenting and writing and bringing my thoughts out on the design of watches. But, it hits you all of a sudden when you realize that you are being influential with what you're saying, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. If I talk about a certain watch, let's say just say this, the Memovox, okay? I say I love the Memovox. I own one and I wear it, and it's just the best. It's a great everyday wearing watch. This is a superb everyday wearing watch, just not hiding it. But the thing is, if I say that and I get 10 of you interested in this watch, That is serious demand. Now imagine all 10 of you live in the same neck of the woods and you all go to the same authorized dealer. What happens? You know, it's amazing just how few people you really need to influence to start a tidal wave in this space. So in saying that, I think that's a good question that was asked of me about the Oyster Perpetual and just whether they're available or not. It's nice. I like the dynamic conversations that come out of these. So this Memovox, not a Memovox, it's a Polaris. I find it to be a really interesting watch. I know David from Just Horology picked up one of these, and it's a really interesting piece. I think the idea of the numerals, the setting, I just so wish, oh, come on, give me something high res, please, please, please. Odinky's pretty good. Well, here we go. Here's a no date variant. I think this watch deserves to have a no date feature because it's just so much cleaner. The inset compressor styling, polarizing. Again, we can say again that the blue dial is something quite polarizing for people. So maybe a black dial is a better option. And if it was me getting this watch, I would be gunning for a Memovox in the family. Very unique piece. Memovox and JLC hand in hand. I just don't like the date complication on it. I think it needs to be clean. Anyway, I hate these streams because I just want to buy every watch I see. Stephen, don't worry. The thing is, when you're doing this, you tend to form an attachment around these. For me especially, when it comes to writing about watches, there are many times when I find something that I really like, and it's very difficult to hone in on something that you want. Okay, scrolling through, there's a mention about a Saab 00033 from Maz. Junghans, much prefer their designs over Nomos. Interesting, Martin. Let's see what else. Picked up a 114060 as my first watch, and the watch is that watch. Aside, very good point, and I will pull that up as well. Okay, so let's look at the Saab 00033. Jeez, Seiko's in their names. I've heard of this piece, and me and Seiko references, absolutely useless. Okay, so as a simple everyday wearer, it is great, and very much feels like Seiko's variant. This is a great picture, Reddit. This almost feels like Seiko's attempt at a Oyster Perpetual in a way. Great point. This is actually a superb Seiko to get. Not the SKX. I'm sick and tired of talking about that. Even the Alpinist, in a sense. This, to me, feels more like what you want when you go Seiko. It's a little bit more expensive than your standard pieces, but it captures the elements that you want out of a Seiko, like the Dauphine hands, beautiful batons, polishing, great minute track. I mean, it's superb. It's a great looking watch. As a first watch, it's something relatively affordable in the scheme of things. Hell, it's cool. Again, polarizing. It's got the name Seiko on the dial, but it's saying that. Interesting. Martin, I will get to the point about Nomos and everything. And there's a mention about the 114060. This is the watch, as he said. It's funny how tastes sometimes change and sometimes remain. I find it interesting. Come on, get a high-res image. Apologies, everyone. We're going to get there eventually. Anything that's above and beyond. Another Reddit post. Let's see. High-res? No. One of the most popular watches in the world, and you can't find a great high-res image of it. Come on. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Anything. Here we go. I constantly battle and internalize this point, and we'll get to that now because I've missed a lot of your suggestions in the chats. Geez, JLC Deep Sea Chrono, I dig it, American Jedi. It's a really nice looking watch. Master Control Date, greater than the Polaris, Doc Paps. It's a great piece as well. Okay, let's slow down for a sec and we will discuss this briefly. I debate this often about how did this watch become popular? How do many of these pieces become popular? I think in part it's to do with how much we talk about them, how much we talk up the watches. Yes, it has an interesting history, but I mean, I, for one, find this, at this point in time, I guess it's maybe just me in my position, doing what I do, writing about watches and constantly looking at them all the time. I find this watch relatively boring for what it is at this point. And it's funny. It's funny how your opinions on things change. It's a great piece. It's a watch that you could wear for the rest of your life, no problem. But For me, it's just something that doesn't really have an X factor at this point. It's a great wearing watch. It's rugged, but yeah, it's mad. This is the Humvee of watches. Interesting. Doom Platoon, like him name. That's awesome. Okay. And there's mention about the Santos being a banging watch from Gone Wild, World Gone Mad. Love that. Oh, geez, and I'm just getting suggestions about pulling up Pateks and everything. As a first watch, hell, let's just pull up a Patek, whatever, 5206. Is that it? No, 5250. G. Let's see. Oh, that's nice. Are we talking about numerals on the dial? That is cool. So this was an important piece. Funny fact, I found this the other day, that Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones wears one of these pieces. Yellow gold, if I'm not wrong. Come on. Is it so difficult to give me high-res images? Christie's. You never let me down, Christie's. Love you guys. So we're talking about the 369. This is, I mean, for a first watch, this is just nuts. For someone who's interested in the hobby, and then they decide, okay, I'm going to wait 6 years to save up for one of these. It's just funny. I like the numeral placement, though. It's very good. I kind of wish there wasn't a date window. Talk about that in a second. The sub is overplayed to the max, Q Maestro. I hope I'm not the only one to believe that. There's just something about the watch. It just does not hook me as much as it should at this point in time. I've spoken about it too much, I think. It's actually great. In both ways, you could say, let me just pull up, what is the other watch? Santos. Yeah, the Santos is cool. Cartier Santos. So this idea of quote unquote influence can work both ways. You can influence the market and say, hey, go out and get the watch. But then if you overemphasize, I mean, some platforms, I love watching Wake Up with Watches on Watchbox reviews. But I looked at today's one, for example, and found that it's just, the watches are just the same. FP Journe, overplayed, Submariner, GMT, this and that. It's like, okay, we get it. We've seen enough. You know, what I like about Tim is that he's able to give us a broader spectrum of watches to look at. And comes a time when you're just like, okay, enough with that same piece. It's nice looking at variety. And again, I'll emphasize for those who've just joined possibly, I think first watches should have an X factor, especially if you know a bit about watches. You shouldn't just go for what everyone suggests. Okay, geez, now the problem is when I say tag me in the chat, there's like 15, there's like 15 suggestions and questions. Okay. So, watch habit. And watch habit, you're the gent who picked up the white dial, the meteorite dial GMT. Hell, that's a cool watch. Okay, and that's a great watch with X factor, right? Okay, let's see what else. There's so much. Oris pointed date, carbon fiber dials. I like how they look. Carbon fiber as a material, I think it's cool. Industrial design-wise, I think it's great because it's a really hardcore material for what it's used for. God, there's so many suggestions. You guys need to slow down. Longines, okay, Tim, I'll get to it. Longines, Legend Diver. We'll get to it eventually. Okay. Cartier Santos. Now, this really was a watch of the 80s, the 70s and the 80s. Amazing how it got its name and how it developed. It has to be one of the watches with the greatest history behind it. I love the whole story about Santos Dumont and his aviation scheme and his attempt to fly for the first time. And the joke is this was the first sports watch, all things considered, which is pretty cool. So it has a great story. It definitely has an X factor. For me, again, I probably hit this point home too much, but I always say that I think watches need to be scaled appropriately for what they are. And my taste, I find that the Santos with the smaller dial and case and the tapering bracelet looks so much more integrated and interesting. This is not technically, yes, it's a sports watch, but this is not really a sports watch. I mean, who's going to go mountain climbing with a watch like this? For that reason, I think it should be there when you want it, but also out of the way when you don't. And a slightly smaller size would address that well. Great looking watch. Does it peak? Does it hit the tank? Is it better than a tank? That's open to debate. I think the tank has a little bit of an edge over this piece, but interesting. Okay. Have you spot any Orient until now? Carithus Dreams. No, I haven't. Orient for me is another brand. It's like Seiko. I just haven't spent much time on anything. Okay, let's pull up some Nomos since there's been suggestion. Again, the 2254, Gorgeous, gorgeous watch. And the Nomos Neomatic, is that what you said? Nomos Neomatic. Now, what is that piece again? Is that just an automatic variant? Okay, and you said 30, it doesn't matter sizes. I mean, they're all the same watch, basically, right? So what do I like about this piece? One thing, the main spot color that grabs me is that use of red around the date track. That's actually one of the best pieces on this watch that I like. Actually, of all Nomos watches, it's the one piece that I really like. Is there a face-up photo of it? Why only take photos of it from the side? Here's an example. No. Damn. Okay. I'm just going to have to look at it sideways. Apologies, everyone. And I pulled up the wrong watch. Hold on. Bear with me. There it is. Okay. This actually ties in very well with the Patek 5250 that I pulled up. Is that I think dress watches are best when they use elements on their dials to address details like the date complication. So certain pieces have the date complication running around the dial. It's nice seeing separate hands like we see here on the dial. What I like so much about the Nomos Neomatic is that it does that in a way, using the highlight that runs around the dial. It uses that space in a way. Interesting watch for that reason. With regards to the styling of the piece, it doesn't appeal to me anywhere near as much as the Orion does. I know technically this is very Bauhaus. This looks like the kind of clock you would see in a classroom. For that reason, hits those points well. But for me, I think Nomos really does understate it very well. What I'd like to see from the brand, and what I've said before, is that they need to do understated, but add some flash to it. Bauhaus was also about experimentation. So adding different colors to the batons, to the dial, that kind of thing. Give it a bit more excitement. Anyway, let's pull up. Geez, I've been going all over the shop. It's great. There's thoughts on Zenith, Arnold & Son, Rado, Captain Cook. Jeepers. I love the variety. And I'm going to try and slow down as much as possible because, you know, I struggle keeping up with everything. A great suggestion from Orange Hand. What did you mention, Orange Hand? I think I missed it. Anyway, let's see. The idea of going manual wind for a first watch. Daily interaction. Great point, Orange Hand. That is great. Manual wind watch. It's something that really, it gets you to appreciate the mechanics that you're wearing, which I think is important. You want something that you engage with. Interaction is a huge part. When we talk about just design in general, user interaction and how the owner uses the watch. I mean, think about it. Automatic watches nowadays, what's the point of crowns on automatic watches? They disappear. Once you've wound the watch, once you're wearing the watch, you don't need it. And it's strange just where crowns have managed to seat themselves over here at the 3 o'clock position when it should technically be hidden at the top of the case, for example, just because it's so irrelevant for the most part after you've wound it and you're wearing it. But when you have a manual wind watch, you are forced to wear the piece. I feel like this is a manual wind. I think these Neomatic probably means automatic. But you get my point. I find it interesting that you have a watch that you need to wind. It's a very good suggestion from Orange Hand. Thank you for that. Zenith El Primero open dial. Are we talking skeleton, Q Maestro? Yeah, again, I want to try and keep it focused to watches. Here I'm speaking about watches for first watches. This is hardly a first watch for someone, but I really do like this. It's an important piece because it was one of the first annual calendars from the family, if I'm not wrong. I think it's the second generation of the first annual calendars. Correct me if I'm wrong, but interesting watch. And I do love the placement of the numerals. I still wish there was a 6 at the base of the dial, though. Okay, and there was a great point about the Rado Captain Cook. And I hope we are Captain Ook. Maybe he'll give me something. There we go. I hope we're diversifying enough with the watches we're looking at. It's great. I think this has been a good show running through these pieces for a change. So the Rado Captain Cook, great history. I'd actually love to talk about this since we've just looked at the Zodiac Seawolf. If you've missed it, it was a video that came out this week. This watch feels the same in a way. Shares that same kind of history. Really put the brand of Rado on the map. So yeah, it's great. Mentioned about Zodiac Super Seawolf. Oh my goodness. Thoughts on the Zenith Rainbow Elite Williams watches. You know, I want to try and bring this chat back to first watches if possible. Nothing too heavy duty. Zenith Defy, classic plain dial. Okay, let's look at that as well. Yeah, it's coming up to the 2-hour mark, and I feel like I'm getting hit. Just call it classic. Is that what they say? Okay, interesting. So I've said this often about the Defy range. Let's get something. You know, this is, again, this whole channel is based on personal opinion. Don't take any of this as fact or law. This is just a personal opinion. And I find the Defy range to be too much of a Jean-Claude Beaver glory project. It has his DNA all over it. I say that every time I talk about the Zenith Defy. It's one of those watches that just seems to just leak Hublot DNA, or Hublot, or however you want to say it. You know, I try and make the pronunciation simple enough for everyone to understand. You know, there was critique. I think I was told that I said Blancpain or however I said it wrong the other day. You know, I'm only human. Blancpain, however you want to say it. Hamilton W10, great suggestion from Tippy. This is a great first watch. I don't know how they're priced in the scheme of things, but it's a watch that has a great X factor. It's an enthusiast's watch, and that's where it has its stance. Great suggestion. We'll stick on this now. Asking me, oh, geez, there are so many suggestions. You guys have got to back it off a little bit. Funny. It's so funny. I mean, if I just scroll through this, there's so much. Rolex 1002 from Clive. Clive always brings up some great suggestions. Let's have a look at his suggestion for a change. I have missed out on Clive's points recently. Oh, yes. Manual wind. Beautiful. Are we talking about, I love the gold. Oh, stunning. Thank you for this, Clive. This is nice. What's a good example? There's so many of them. I'm guessing these are all, it's Oyster Perpetual. Okay. So it's not your standard Oyster. You have to actually wind, you wouldn't have to wind it. It's automatic. Something about just a simple everyday wearing watch that is appealing. Really nice. And with the Oyster case that you can wear it and really beat it up. Looking at Pam, oh my goodness. The problem is, just imagine that you're getting fed 30 suggestions at once. It's very difficult to try and vet out everything at once. Let's see. Pam 0076264. Oh my god, another brand that doesn't seem to know how to name their stuff easily. And someone saying that 2 hours is nothing for me. I tell you what, I'm hungover. Come tomorrow, I'll be, you know, sleeping in and everything. 2 hours is small change, Tetley says. I really wish 2 hours was easy for me, but it takes it out of you when you're battling, you know, addressing the chat and trying to bring across poignant points. That's not the plain dial. Oh, geez, Bud, I don't know. If you're talking about the Rolex, I'm sorry if I missed it. Tudor North flag we can pull up as well. Neomatic, we've looked at Nomos, Universal Genève, Polrata. This is what happens. Once everyone gets on, suddenly there's like 50 suggestions. 1 more hour. Damn your eyes, Clive says. That's so funny. Okay. Rich Buddy, thank you for joining, Rich. It's always great having you here. I love watching your shows if I get a chance. I always miss them live, but I love catching up. It's great thoughtful content, which is something we all need. So again, this is the Jean-Claude Beaver DNA machine. Okay, it's unique. It has an X factor to it, but in the scheme of things, when we go Zenith, geez, just the A386 is great enough. That is the reference, right? No, just say El Primero. I'm not thinking enough today. 38. Geez, I spelled that badly. I'm losing it, ladies and gentlemen. Primero. Come on. For me, talking about Zenith, we're talking about watches with X factor. This watch has a great amount of X factor in the Zenith family. Even now, yes, it's a watch that's spoken about a lot, but hell, it's a stunning piece. And maybe it is polarizing with the dial and everything else, but it's unique enough. When it comes to chronographs, I think it's unique enough to be a superb piece in that family in general. So Hamilton doesn't hold a candle to the CWC version at a fraction of the cost, Tetley. And if we're talking about the original, I agree, using original Hamilton movements and everything else. Let's see. Tudor North Flag. Okay, so it's a watch that I've spoken about before. Let's just have a look at this. Let's see. Let's try and balance. Let's try balance. Tudor North Flag. I've had some good hands-on time with this watch, and I will say it is very un-Tudor. You know, and I've said this often about the North Flag, that it should be a watch that is praised more by the company itself. They don't emphasize that it commemorates the Greenland North expedition and just what those watches did. They were worn and used. They were basically pre-explorers, worn at the same time that Hillary and Norgay went up Everest. They were Tudor-based watches that used the same dials, the same everything. If you have the book A Man and His Watch, it's in there somewhere. So this watch commemorates that and commemorates the Ranger and how it developed over time. This very much looks like a Ranger 2. I did the video about this, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, and it uses many elements from the Tudor Ranger 2 in the way it's been arranged, but it's interesting. Modern, but retro. Interesting how the numerals look almost buck for buck like a 214-270 Explorer, right? Crazy. Yeah, okay. G381 from Tippy, thank you. Yeah, me and my references, I'm losing it. Let's see what else is going on. Buy the Explorer. Ori, am I really behind? Okay, let me try and catch up. I'm not too far behind. It's just keeping up with the chats. That's the hardest part for me. Carlos, thank you as always. It's such a pleasure having you here, sir. I would love to look at your watches. You have a stellar collection. And how's your 5196 treating you, by the way? Okay. So let's try and bring the discussion back to first watches. I said this again in the beginning that it needs to be a watch that I think has an X factor in the family that you're finding. And many of us make mistakes when it comes to buying our first watches. And many people compromise by buying lesser watches when they should be putting some more thought and time into it before really picking up the one that they want. So let's try and hone in on the discussion again and get something back again. There's a question about the Hamilton Pilot Pioneer. Funny, this Rado feels very much like a more modernized version of the Zodiac Seawolf in many ways. I see the elements in there. It just doesn't have the same balance between the numerals and everything. It's all fatter, you know. It's more of a 60s era piece, if I'm not wrong. I haven't looked at the history of this watch enough, but this watch really did put Rado on the map. And interesting. Oh, Bud Owen's saying, what about the Longines sector dial you love? Very good points. Let's pull that up. If I just type in sector, it should be there. Speaking of which, I'm debating whether I should put the video up next week or the week after. I think the video will go up next week. I did a good, thorough write-up on the design of this watch that I hope you'll enjoy. I really went into detail about, come on, internet, work with me here. There we go. I hope the signal's okay. I hope this doesn't slow down too much. So I go into detail about the design of this watch and how I think it plays so well with the vintage-inspired elements and a bit of the modern and the use of line weights and balance. This is a great first watch. I think Longines is doing some great stuff with their pieces. But again, it has the stigma of being a lesser watch in the family of pieces. Would you go for a Longines if you really want a Rolex as a first watch or an Omega? That's the question. Sure, this piece, one thing I will say for sure, it is the most beautiful sector dial watch on the market at the moment, I think. And the one that we really compare it against, there's a Patek Philippe that has a sector layout. I don't know, is it a 5? It's a 5296, maybe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That's one example, but it's a Patek. I mean, who can afford that? And then the one that we really look at is the JLC sector series. This piece, with the way it's arranged its dial, let's see if I can find a face up. I think the way I cap off the video when I finish is something like, it's a watch that draws you in the longer you stare at it. And interesting. Martin's saying I should go for it because it is a Longines. Yeah, and I mean, that's something else that's good. At this time, in the late 30s, early 40s, Longines and Omega were sharing a lot of parts. They were sharing the same dials. In the video, I put up a picture of an Omega that I snapped was a 1938 reference. Looks almost identical to this. And it's crazy just how there was this chopping and changing between dial manufacturers at the time. But for what it is, it's great. The one gripe I have is the size is a little bit big for those who might have smaller than average wrists. I would have liked to have seen this watch also introduced in a 36mm format or 37, just to bring it down ever so slightly. I think because the lugs are quite long when you wear it. But yeah, let's see what else is going on. Okay, I'm going to slowly but surely wind down. We've hit the 2-hour mark, and let's see. I have no regret on getting the Intramatic 68. Okay, let's try to tone it down and bring it back to the subject. If you could all possibly comment about a watch, if you could choose your first watch again, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing or a good thing, but the watch that you bought that you may have regretted buying, and maybe the watch that you have now that you wished you had bought all the way back in the day when you first started. That might be a suggestion. Just to slowly but surely wind down over the next 20 minutes, half an hour. We've been running for a good 2 hours, which is quite surprising. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love the variety. This idea, but the whole thought behind these subjects really gets you engaged. I hope you're enjoying it as well. This is a cool piece. So it's actually a flyback chrono from Panerai. I don't know so much if they got the idea with the crowns and the pushers and everything right, because these pushers are kind of unprotected, but it's interesting. It's a nice balance. In a way, you see, if you squint your eyes, you get to see just how well balanced everything is on the dial and the placement, the use of the blue highlight. It's stunning. I mean, it's a diving chronograph. Can these pushers be operated in the water? Do not know. Very interesting piece, though. Thank you for the suggestion, whoever mentioned it. I'm sure I've missed it. Great suggestion, though. Interesting watch. Okay. I would have gotten a Zin U1, Tippy says. Okay, let's have a look. So the Hamilton W10, I think, is great. It does definitely have an X factor. Compared to the, what were we looking at? The Spitfire from IWC, I think it's quite a unique piece. It has a bit of an X factor over the standard. So the Zin U1, really, I think this does epitomize Zin as a brand. That starkness, the use of the contrast and colors and line weights, extremely German. This looks like there was a mention about the IWC Porsche design that I've done a video on about a while ago. This piece feels the same way. It feels like it has that same motif. Love it when dive watches use crowns offset like this at the base. And notice just how well finished the case and the bezel is, and how it actually corresponds with the dial. It has this matte, rough texture behind it. Cool looking watch, right? Very interesting. Okay, let's see what else is going on. And I'm going to slowly but surely pull up some pieces. Just got on. Sent you a shot of my Reverso Tribute 1931 first watch, Wisconsin Watch Guy. I mean, that is, I hope I'm saying Wisconsin Watch Guy. That's what I think We Watch Guy means. Reverso 1931 Tribute is definitely a watch that has X factor for sure. And hell, they're not exactly the cheapest Reversos out there. I think playing on that idea of heritage and everything, they do tend to charge a little bit more, but great looking piece. I mean, it's a watch that isn't polarizing. I'll say that for sure. Dress watch, simple, definitely a great sports watch if you know about the history and everything. Great suggestion. Thank you for that. And that was from We Watch Guy. I would have chosen my Zodiac as my first watch, Cheetown says. Great point. And let's pull up a Seawolf. We've chatted about it already, but let's have a look. And there's one that's really cool that I saw the other day. It's called the PX. And if we know the story, if we actually know the history behind these watches, they were made to be affordable for soldiers all over the world, and you could buy them in American PX stores. This is the Hodinkee version. But they've managed to really jump onto a space of their own because they offer great value for money. They still call back to how they originally positioned themselves. But at the same time, unique. You can identify them as Seawolves. Great suggestion, Cheetown. She-Town, Chi-Town. I always get your name wrong. Okay. Love the Explorer 214270. Yeah, that's awesome. It's a really cool piece. Regret the Rolex GMT2. Should have got the Tudor 58. Fascinating. Figuring it out. MD. Very interesting point. So, and I'd like to, if you could tag me in the chat and mention what the GMT2 was. Is it a 5-digit reference? First Omega in space for my first watch. I regret the Omega Bond Quantum from Bud Owens. And if I'm not wrong, the Bond Quantum of Solace was an Aquaterra, right? No, I can't remember. But I have a feeling it was an Aquaterra of some line. This was actually the oh geez, there's so many. I tell you, they do so many Bond watches. It's just ludicrous. But this is one of the pieces that they put out anyway. No, in Quantum of Solace, he wore a Planet Ocean. Oh God, I don't know. It's just nuts. I'll see if I can catch up with you in the chat at this point. So let's pull up one of these on the screen and get into the chat again. Let's pull that up again. It's funny. Very interesting, Bud Owens. You mentioned the first Omega in the beginning. And thank you so much for joining, Bud Owens. It's a pleasure having you here. The Germans, the Bugenisch. That's funny. IWC is a Swiss brand, Tim. Apologies. Yeah, Swiss, German, Swiss. I'm a bit slow here today. Okay. The Rolex 126 has. Okay, let's see. Again, I scroll down to the chat and I miss half of you. So let's pull up this piece. There's been a question about it. It's a Datejust, having an X factor. 126. Does it have a roulette wheel? I don't know. 2, 3, 4. Let's have a look. See. Oh, very nice. Fluted bezel. So as far as Datejusts go, how do we categorize these watches really? I've tried to do a write-up around this piece, around Datejusts in general, ranking great ones and not so great ones and what really makes them. I think the fluted bezel and the Jubilee is just Datejust all the way. Whether it should have a black dial or not, up to debate. Interesting watch though. Hell, it's so understated actually. There's something apart from the shininess of the bracelet and the bezel. But if we know anything about the Datejust, it was such a pioneer in its time because it was the first rotating date on a watch. Think about how important that piece is. Actually, a great point. This was really a great suggestion from Maz. I like this. Why I say that is because it's simple enough that it manages to hone in on the date complication a lot more. You get what I mean? It looks basic, first impressions, and you see the date as the thing that stands out quite a lot on the dial. And then, yeah, very good. Very good. I've just been thinking, that's just come off the top of my head now. Very, very interesting. Okay. Shy Town, Tippy, thank you. I'm useless. Okay. Let's see what else is going on here. And I'm going to slowly but surely slow down. I wish my one and done watch was a Rolex Bluesy from Mr. C. Mr. C, you bring up some great points. Let's have a look at that as well. I really like this. With regards to a Datejust being that simple piece that really epitomizes the rotating date with such a simple dial, no flash, it does have a great presence in this configuration. Thank you for that suggestion. So I do not know the reference. Two-tone. I literally just said blue Submariner two-tone. How pathetic is that? 116613, yeah, that's it. So which do we prefer, the super case or just the standard? This watch definitely does have an X factor in the community. Where's a good example? That's a good reference. Okay. It's funny how this watch has such a broad appeal. It does feel like a watch that comes from the 90s, you know, the 80s and the 90s, but in some way, in a similar way to the root beer GMT, for me, the CHNR, I think this one has a similar draw for that reason. A beautiful dial. It's a gorgeous looking watch. Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. C. A very good choice because it's versatile, it's usable, it's stylistic, great balance of colors. I like the yellow and blue, the bit of silver. I don't know if has it aged well? Question, don't know. We Watch Guy, it is a stunning looking piece. And there's a mention about not being a Cyclops fan from the Bugenisch. I'm the same. I've said this often that I think the Cyclops could have been refined a little bit more. And that seems to be a thing with Rolex in general, is that they stick to what they like and not what everyone else says, as we know. And when we look at just how the Cyclops was made and finished, I have a feeling that it was a little bit less thought out than it could have been. And they obviously, at this point in time, they could have improved it, but it is now a staple in their family. So yeah, it's cool. So we will see what else is going on here. Sky Dweller from Raymond. Sky Dweller is also cool. Let's pull that up as well. But this has been a great show. I'm definitely losing steam at this point. I've been running on empty for a little while. It definitely, this show demands a little bit more think and thought process, because you're trying to like internalize what you're saying. You're trying to be presentable with what you're saying, but at the same time get a bit tongue-tied and having to read the comments and chats. So I said the Sky Dweller. So this lines up very well with the two-tone bluesy Submariner, because it's a watch that is so unique to the brand at this point. I really liked the video that I did on it, talking about it being a watchmaking masterclass. There have been some good points raised about this piece, like why would you need a month indicator? Who doesn't know that it's March or whatever? But I think the way they've used the dial, let's see if I can get a better image to show off the accent of red. It's not the best image, but you get the idea. The idea of accenting the dial with a bit of red to highlight the month, I find it so interesting. And it's one of those subtle cues. I think one of the best cues that Rolex has ever had with their watches is that subtlety of that complication there. Unique, interesting, special. I think it's great. Thank you, David Coffey, for that. And Anthony's saying AC3 has just started his stream. He may have sent you an invite. Anthony, I haven't checked my emails. I'm trying to keep up with all of you guys, really. And I'm winding down. I'm definitely going to conk out in the next like 10 minutes or so. Cheatan's saying Rolex is like a cat. You can call out to them and they ignore you. Exactly. It's funny. And you appreciate Cyclopses as you age. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's another thing. You can see the date. I'm definitely someone who doesn't prefer a date on a watch. I much prefer the simplicity of a no date. But, you know, that's just the way it is. Everyone, I love that everyone has their own tastes, and it's great to see an element like a Cyclops lens transition from what, 1940? When was it introduced? 1945. No, they didn't have Cyclopses. I think they started getting Cyclops lenses in around 1948 kind of area, and it's amazing to see just how they have lasted this period of time. And then we look at Panerai and their use of Cyclops lenses, and they've put them underneath the crystal. So, you know, that's just the way it is. It's the development. Interesting point about the Bond watches. It's funny how much money James Bond has made for brands like Rolex and Omega. If it wasn't for James Bond, I don't think the Submariner would have gained anywhere near the same amount of attention. We're talking early 60s and just how it developed in that time period when they were still talking about sports watches and dress watches and the whole deal. So let's see, Eco, 5-minute repeater watch. We can, when we get to, we've gone over 2 hours at this point. I'm slowly going down with regards to my thinking, my process. It's nice that we've sort of slowed down to the more basic pieces. Minute repeaters in general, repetition classique. I could have a look at it now. Let's just see what else. There's an interesting point from Andreas. We say, let's say budget, no problem. My first watch would be a Patek Philippe reference 570. Okay. See, the thing is, I love the stuff that I can just pull up quickly. I just say 570 Patek and it's done. When it comes to a new name, I struggle. Okay. So this is just is it a simple Calatrava? Is that what the line falls into? Now, it's a beautiful looking watch. And these are probably super highly collectible at this point in time, right? I think I have seen this piece featured before on other channels. Maybe Herdinky had this watch on a Talking Watches episode. I have a feeling, I might be wrong. This is Matt Jacobson, Facebook marketing director. I don't know. I think he has one of these pieces. It's a stunning piece. I love the no date. I like the central seconds as well. Really nice and clean. Let's see what else is going on here. Nice looking watch though. Really dig it. Really does epitomize the Calatrava style. I hope I'm saying it's a Calatrava. I might be wrong in that sense. Ian Fleming actually wore a 1016. Yeah, he did. And it's funny just how as far as I know, Albert Broccoli gave Sean Connery the Submariner. I don't know if that's the truth or that's how the story developed, but it's crazy to think that the Explorer could have received that same praise that the Submariner now does. Anyway, finish my stream and be a guest on AC3. Anthony, I don't think he would want me cramping his style. And I definitely, at this point, I mean, it's 12:15 in the UK. I definitely can't deal with interrogation at this point. I'd love to join in on a stream, and I think I will in the future. But, I'm slow. At this point, I mean, my coffee's finished. Alcohol's run out. We're running on fumes here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Tissot Heritage from Thomas. Thomas, I haven't seen you at all today, so welcome. It's great having you here, brother. Again, I hope you're doing okay. Let's pull up a Tissot Heritage. I have to address Thomas because the man is such an enthusiast. I mean, he is the true enthusiast on this platform. Oh, I love the numerals. Let's see if I can find interesting use. And Tissot as a brand, I mean, they also have a great history when we talk about just where they have been and their development and their history. Interesting case. And it even has the Omega style. What do they call these ribbon style lugs? I do not know. Anyway, catching up with all of you. I was actually right, Andreas, that Matt Jacobson has one. Jeez, I mean, if you talk about a nerd, how does someone remember that rubbish? Like, of all the people, of all the watches you've seen on all the shows, how did I know that Matt Jacobson wears this piece? That's just nuts. That's funny. I'm impressed with myself, actually, at this point. 2 hours in, that's pretty mad. Budget, no problem. My watch would be a Moser Pioneer Perpetual. Let's have a look at Moser. And talking about this piece, interesting watch, Thomas. Thank you for suggesting it. Looking at the size of it, it looks pretty big. I do like, and I'm sure this is calling back to one of their originals from the year 19, whenever. It's nice seeing the use of the text that they've incorporated. They're really calling back to that vintage style. Love the lugs, the lug design. More brands need lugs like these. I'm actually surprised they didn't get reprimanded by Omega for using them, because that is their trade secret at this point in time, Okay, so there was another suggestion that I missed. Let's see. Am I a football fan? If so, which club? And this is from We Watch Guy. Are we talking, American? I'm a huge rugby fan. Let's see, Moser Pioneer. With regards to American football and NFL, who do I love? I actually, when I can catch a game, when I can catch a Super Bowl, I just love watching. I don't support any specific team. I normally root for underdogs. I love it when they go against the big names. I don't want to butcher any of your names and get it completely wrong. But I can say that I really do highly recommend, for those of you who live in America, who don't know much about rugby as a sport, you really should watch a game and try and understand how different the players. I love that difference between American football and rugby in general. We're talking about soccer or football. What do I say? I'd say AC Milan. I've always enjoyed as a brand, as a family. But again, no, I'm not a football fan. I'm much more of a rugby fan. I guess it's because in rugby, there's always action, regardless. In football, you can watch 85 minutes and see one goal. It's not my cup of tea. Once I owned a Rolex 2017 GMT. I got over the hype and got to appreciate other watches for what they are. So as a first watch, I would have gone Tudor 58. Figuring it out. Very interesting point. You're the first person who's actually mentioned a Tudor over a Rolex. And that's the thing. The watch's hype factor can be such a detractor at the end of the day, because you get these things and you think, oh, this is the one that I want. And then you wear it for a while and think, well, I see it everywhere, whether it's online, whether it's on other people. And it loses that X factor, the uniqueness behind it. I don't know. Watch enthusiasts are weird people. So the Pioneer, very unique watch. This is the piece that Moser really, they say it is their top seller, with their fume dials, very basic and simple layout. And only you really know what you're owning and what you're wearing, which I think is what makes it so unique at the end of the day. It's well above and beyond your generic dress watch. which is unique. I don't know about the crowns, if they're screw-down crowns and everything else, but it's a great suggestion though. Football equals soccer. Okay, great. Yeah, you know, we watch guy. I miss out on a few things. Poser Perpetual. Okay, sorry. Poser Perpetual. Let's have a look at the Pioneer Perpetual. I spelled Perpetual terribly wrong there. Very interesting. Okay. So we got okay. So I'm thinking, when I think Perpetual, I think calendar, you know. This is an automatic. So you have a movement inside, you have a subdial. That is very clean. I like that a lot. With the date complication, that offset balancing is also really nice. Very good suggestion. And this is from Amin. Very good suggestion on this watch. I actually much prefer this over the standard. When it comes to dress watches, as much as simplicity is great, I think you want something a little bit more complicated on your dial. You want something to play around with your eyes, you know? You can browse and have a good look. I played rugby at high school. It was a great sport. Played as a right pillar. Interesting, Carlos. Very nice. Thank you. Love the case in the Moser. Yeah, it's cool. So you can't stand the power reserve, and says it does. I must say, looking at it now, it looks a little bit too modern for what the watch is in a way. The use of green and all of that there. It would have been nice if they just kept it simple and incorporated the standard, just basic lines for up and down. It does look a little bit more like a fuel gauge than anything, but they are really interesting watches. Jeez, look at that dial. That's a better example. Wow. That is a stellar looking watch. I love that finish. It's something about the fume. I don't even know how they do it. I don't know the process. I don't know what they do to get that effect. And just the small details, like the way they fill it out the case and really hollow, make it look a lot lighter, skeletonized, a bit of modern, a bit of sport, you know, it's cool. If I like rugby, what is deconstructed? This is your question. If you like rugby, what's your opinion of the Tudor Black? One designed for the All Blacks. Yeah, what did they call it? They called it the All Black, and it was a chronograph or something. PVD. I'm not a fan. I think when it comes to watches especially, you want to celebrate the metal you're wearing. And I think PVD kind of gets in the way of that. So with watches, I'm a bit of a purist in that sense. So when you're wearing a watch that's made of carbon fiber or a watch that's made of ceramic, don't go hiding the ceramic with a paint scheme or something. Really, you know, bring it to the forefront. When you're dealing with a white gold watch, make sure it's white gold. When you PVD a case, it affects it. So in that sense, I would love, if it was a black watch, if it was a black ceramic watch, then absolutely, I would say it's great. But as far as PVD goes, no, I don't think the finish works as well as just your standard metal. So yeah, that's a bit more of a purist opinion. You should celebrate the metal that you're wearing. White gold. I'm sure these are all white gold. You can correct me if I'm wrong. What a beautiful dial. This watch could be the one that ends the show. I mean, as a first watch, it's definitely not up everyone's alley, but it's pretty cool, you know. And this dial for me just sings. When you go for Moser, you want to get something that really is out there. I'm not talking like the Swiss cheese watch or that organic watch that they made. What do they call it? The Botany or whatever. This to me is Moser Pioneer. You know, oh, looks great. I love that color. What a finish. And Amin, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it, man. It's been great. We've had a long chat around the subject. I hope you managed to take something away from all of these little points. I don't know if it's just gibberish. Oh, the Vented Black is gorgeous as well. Wow. Thank you for the suggestion. Let's see it on the wrist. Talk about a moon phase. How is that for subtle? Oh, it's just great. Who was the one who suggested the piece? I don't know. I think I missed it. Okay, there's mention Rolex perfected the diver sport language, but are they the originators? Okuzen. That's a very good point. A very, very good point. And it's up to debate. I mean, it's almost as if what I like, we can actually, I think this can be the last point we can discuss before we close off the show. I really like this. The fact that the moon phase is so subtle that it's just a highlight. It's beautiful. This is a real elegant dress watch for any kind of occasion. The Vanta Black. Okay, the watch champion. I don't know if you suggested it, but thank you. Let's talk about this briefly. And what we can do is we can just pull up the 5508. I do love talking about this because it's quite an interesting debate to have. And what I'll do is I'll compare it against the 50 fathoms, say, and just where they sit next to each other. What's a good example? Okay, so this watch was introduced in and around, I would say, 56, 57, and it was designed for the Polish military. This is a unique piece in the Blancpain family. It's almost as if at the time when Blancpain and the likes of Zodiac were bringing out their sports watches, the wristwatch experience, thank you for joining. It has been a great show. I've enjoyed the diversity. Don't forget that next week is Wrist Shot Week. So all 250 of you still watching, you can email me. I've put my email in the drop down of the description of this video, so you can send me your wrist shot and we can have a great show the following week. I really enjoy the show. It's been it was such a nice time to connect with all of you and look at your watches and enjoy it. Okay, so getting back on topic. This is a beautiful watch, first off. But the thing is, this watch is definitely geared more towards military purpose, military personnel, usability, not so much dress and formality. And what Rolex did and what they planned and the whole idea behind the Submariner, since we're talking about the sports watch, what made it a sports watch, is that they wanted to first and foremost make it a watch that could be worn as a functional dress watch, as well as something that could be used in the water. It's almost as if they had the dress watch idea first in mind, because it was the turnograph. This watch originated from the turnograph, and that piece, really, they had no idea. You look at the adverts for the turnograph, and it's like, use it to time your cooking in the oven. It's like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Once they transitioned to the GMT and the Submariner references, they got their own. And in that way, this thought of blending the dress and sports really worked in their favor, where the 50 fathoms, in my opinion, is a watch that's much more militaristic. And we're just looking at the divide between these two in the photos. This was built for function. This watch came out before the Submariner. The Zodiac Seawolf, you could also argue, was a watch built more for dress. Interesting, though. Great point. That could be a show all to itself, actually. And this mentioned from We Watch Guy, love the Blancpain, but I think people need to cool the faux patina. Yeah. So actually, when I think about it a bit more, I made a video about faux patina that I think you might enjoy. But yes, you can send a picture of your Timex, Tim. Send me anything, really. I don't vet out submissions. I just I name and save every single watch that's sent to me, really. The one time when I think faux patina is appropriate is when it is trying to mirror a watch from the time period. And if you know the watch, you know that this one, for example, if it was made in the 50s, most definitely had radium on the dial, not tritium. So it aged a very specific way. And this looks like a radium dial. It's nice seeing that put through. But when a brand goes out of their way to put tritium fade on their pieces that it just doesn't belong there, that's when you can draw a line. But for this watch, I mean, it's beautiful. Blancpain Air Command is another. There's some great pieces in the family. This, for example, this Hodinkee edition, the idea of faux patina on this, I just don't get, because it's a bathyscaphe, but it's not paying tribute to any watch in particular, really. It's just an amalgamation of parts. And since faux patina sells, they thought of doing that. So that's when I kind of draw the line. I don't like that effect. But if we then refer to, let's say, what's the the new Ed White Speedmaster, I kind of criticized the Ed White 321 when it came out because of the faux patina. But in fact, I mean, if we look at this, here's a perfect example of an Ed White. This would be a tritium dial, and the way they've mirrored it with this piece, I think, is accurate. I think it's correct. It's period correct. There's also talk, and I'd love to do a more in-depth discussion. It'd be great if you could share your thoughts on this. I'm just ranting away. Thomas, thank you for the super chat, brother. I've missed so many of your chats, and yeah, I'm going to slow down. And Founder Time is capital. I think I missed your comment. I don't know if you're on your way. Thank you for joining, James. It's a pleasure having you here as always, sir. So do I like the first Omega in space? Yes, I do, Tim. I think it's great. Really nice piece. And it definitely, it pips this watch, I find, price-wise and what you're getting. So, Thomas, what did you say? I didn't even read your comments. Jeez. It's always a pleasure. I love interacting with you guys. Yeah, you know that. It's just great. I really hope you're feeling better, Thomas. So getting back to this, what was I saying? The discussion I wanted to have, and I'd like more information, is that these pieces were introduced with this fade to their dials, because that's just how tritium was back then. Some remained white, some went that creamy color. Interesting, though. Tough call, we watch guy says. I have plenty of faux patina watches, but if it is a tribute, it tends to look appropriate. Very well said. First Omega in space, excellent value. Yeah, so I mean, it seems like we managed to stick on this theme of talking about first watches, and from every price segment. We've looked at Nomos, Seiko, Omega, Blancpain. I mean, geez, the variety is always good. That's just what makes these shows nice, is that you never really know where they end up. And yeah, Clam Walker, thank you so much. You're always here. It's always great having you here. So it's so cool, you guys. And as I say, come next week, I will put out some new videos. I have a few on the backup that I can send through, and I'll work on a few more. I'll prepare some more and really get back into it. As I said, I took the week off from watches. The only thing I did was finish a write-up on the little Smith's Everest that I love so much. But yeah, getting back to choose your first watch again. What should I close up with? I want it to be an Omega. You know what? The watch that has spoken to me the most today, this evening, wherever you are in the world, is the Omega Spectre Seamaster. Why do I say that? For those of you who might have just joined, let's find a better image if I can. That's pretty good. I say that because this watch seemed to manage to take vintage motifs, vintage inspired elements, but put it into a modern package, a modern case. Now this watch with the faux patina, yes, that's debatable. We watch guy. I think this watch with the faux patina is a little bit of a divide, but very nicely said. I think Jean Identity said this in the chat earlier, that it's a watch that has managed to stand the test of time far longer than we kind of expected it to. And that goes down to planning. I think planning and thinking through the model a little bit more has helped. Oh, but it's been great. We've had a good show. Thank you all so much for joining. It really has it's always a pleasure doing this, because we get to engage a little bit more. Why doesn't it have a Spectre logo, the Buganish? This one didn't. This one was no James Bond. I think you only saw the Spectre related stuff on the case back. And it's just a great piece. It really is nice. The scale, the size. The only thing that I think would bother people is the bezel, the fact that it's a time zone bezel more than anything else. But I just love that combination. It's also nice seeing the Omega logo replacing the 12 on the dial, which is also something else. But this watch has stood out to me the most as a first watch. And there's mention here saying that this is a replica. No. There was a mention here saying, what was it saying? That this was a first watch. Spectre was my brother's first watch from Maz. That's great. So he picked wisely. And over this course of time, it's a watch that's lasted. It's a watch that looks to be one that will last the test of time. Superb. Pretty thick. And that's another case from Danny. It's the case thickness that's a problem. And that has to do in part with the coaxial movement. But then it's the case back. It's that see-through case back that adds a lot of presence on the wrist, and it is a sandwich dial, if I'm not wrong. That Seamaster bezel almost looks like, so the dial itself is a sandwich, which is something unique. Wisconsin watch guy. Yeah, so this will be the last watch of the show. I think we've gone through it for the last 2.5 hours, which is insane. But congratulations, Maz, and your brother who picked up this piece. This one to me stood out as a superb first watch. Just, I wouldn't say so much for the Spectre heritage, but for the fact that it has managed to last the test of time. It's got a unique flair to it. It's not a Seamaster professional. Has small motifs like a lollipop seconds hand, and creates just accoutrement. You have the NATO strap, and you have all of those bits and pieces. But yeah, geez, we've run a good show. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close off here. Again, just showing what I've been wearing all evening. My little Old Faithful, Smith's Everest. I have a write-up prepared already. It's just me getting down to doing the recording on this watch. And yeah, it's just great. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I've definitely enjoyed the discussion. And come next week, Wrist Shot Week, send in your submissions to my email, which is in the description of this video. And we can get into talking about what watches you have, what you've been enjoying, what you've been wearing. Yeah, and it's been a good time. I hope, still going in something, we're just about to close. I really hope you've all had a great weekend and you enjoy your Sunday. And I hope you're all staying well. Again, I will emphasize that this virus that's going around, you must take seriously. No more reactivity. Just be proactive. It's very well said by a doctor that I've been watching on YouTube. You must definitely think ahead with regards to this. And if it means wearing gloves in public, like neoprene or latex gloves, highly recommend you do it, because you just don't know how your immune system is going to react to a bug that sounds like it's so aggressive. So yeah, I'll say that. I'll end off with the coronavirus talk. There was a great point saying that the Daytona is the coronavirus of watches. Wash your hands. Yeah, that's also important. And just keeping everything as clean as possible. Just remember that this virus loves to live on surfaces for a long period of time. It seems to not enjoy UV light as much. So if it's outside, it's not so bad. But indoors, it can live for as long as 8 days on a surface. So don't touch your face. Don't touch your mouth or your eyes or anything. And keep your hands clean as much as possible. And you should be okay. Unless someone coughs and sneezes in your face, then you are bust. Thank you everyone for joining. And Thomas, again, thank you for the super chat, man. We're gonna have a great show next week, which is our Wrist Shot Week again. Get into all of your pieces, and if you know you're old or your immune system is compromised, simmer down. Yeah, that's true. Everyone, oh geez, and the CK2998 from We Watch Guide, that is a great watch. I should have pulled that up, 2.5 hours and you still don't get it right. Anyway, it's been a great time. So sleep in a tiny bed. Oh, you guys are a laugh. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. I really hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, once again, new videos out next week. And send me your wrist shots now. For the rest of this week, I won't be able to get to your messages because odds are there will be about 100 of you sending in stockpile of toilet paper. That is going to be the stupidest thing I've ever thought of in my life. I probably won't be able to reply to all of your emails, but I can just say that during the stream, I'll be thanking you all and mentioning your names and the watches that you send in, and as it is. Yeah. So again, great weekend. Thank you all for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers for now.